You've been lied to about healing. They told you time alone would erase the pain, that distractions would make the wounds fade, that silence meant peace. But if that were true, why do so many scars still ache in the quiet of night? Why do you still feel the weight of memories you never speak about, the invisible burdens that no one else can see? The truth is, hidden pain doesn't disappear on its own. It lingers in the body, in the breath, in the restless thoughts that circle when the world goes dark. Real healing doesn't come from pretending the hurt isn't there. It comes from meeting it with wisdom, compassion, and presence. And for centuries, Buddhist teachings have carried the medicine. Gentle practices that soothe the heart, dissolve old wounds, and restore a peace so deep it feels like coming home. Tonight, as you listen, you will begin to feel the shift. The pain you've carried silently will start to loosen. The noise in your chest will soften. A quiet calm will rise, like water smoothing sharp stones. And when morning comes, you'll wake with a lighter heart, clearer, softer, more at peace. This isn't just another set of words to fall asleep to. This is a journey inward, a return to the part of you that suffering could never touch. Are you ready to heal the pain you've hidden and awaken the peace you've always had? Let's begin. Beneath the quiet of the night, after the opening you've just heard, the mind begins to wonder, is my pain really mine alone? That ache that hides in your chest, that heaviness you carry in silence, could it be part of something much larger than you? This question opens the door to one of the most beautiful and mysterious teachings of Buddhism, Indra's net. A teaching so vast, it changes how you see yourself, how you see others, and how you understand the hidden loneliness that haunts so many hearts. The image is simple yet profound. Ancient sutras describe the net of Indra, a vast web stretched across the universe, infinite in all directions. At every intersection sits a jewel, polished to brilliance, and in each jewel reflects all the others. Nothing exists in isolation. Every movement of light touches every jewel at once, each being containing the reflection of all others. To hear this is to feel the truth. You are not separate. You have never been separate. This teaching is not philosophy to entertain the mind. It is medicine for the wounds you've hidden. When you carry loneliness, when you feel unseen, when your suffering feels like a locked room no one else can enter, the net of Indra reveals another truth. Your life is held in the lives of countless others. Your struggles are not your prison but your bridge to the whole of humanity. The hidden pain you carry is not a mark of isolation but a thread that connects you to everyone else who suffers. That connection is where healing begins. Think of the times you've wept in silence. You believed those tears were yours alone, but somewhere across the world another jewel was shining with the same drops of grief. When you grieve, you join the great chorus of human hearts, and just as your sorrow is not only yours, neither is your joy. A laugh that escapes you on a tired day echoes through the net, touching countless others who need the sound of it, even if you never meet them. Your very being is part of this endless exchange. Hidden pain thrives in the illusion of separateness. Loneliness whispers that no one understands, that your wounds are private shadows. But Buddhism answers with a different voice. Your suffering is understood because it is shared. Every jewel in Indra's net has cracks, and every crack reflects the whole. This doesn't mean your pain is erased. It means your pain is seen in the larger mirror of life. To recognize this is to dissolve the walls of isolation that keep wounds festering. Modern psychology confirms what the sutras taught centuries ago. Connection heals. Studies on trauma show that recovery accelerates when people feel truly understood, when their experience resonates in another's eyes. Indra's net explains why this works. Healing isn't just about releasing what hurts, it's about recognizing that your pain is woven into the lives of others, and in that recognition, something softens. The suffering that felt like a burden you could not share becomes a thread linking you to the vast fabric of humanity. This teaching also reshapes how we hold compassion. To see another suffer is no longer their story, but part of your own. The net reflects it back to you. That stranger on the bus with tired eyes, the neighbor carrying silent grief, the child who hides fear behind a smile, each one is your reflection. To turn away from them is to turn away from yourself. But when you lean toward them with care, when you let their pain touch your heart, you awaken a medicine that flows both ways. You heal them, and you heal the loneliness in yourself. Hidden wounds often linger because we try to keep them secret, fearing judgment or rejection. But Indra's net whispers a radical truth. Even if you never speak your suffering aloud, it is already known because it is already reflected in others. That knowing can bring relief. You are not alone, even in silence. You exist inside a web of being where every breath and every heartbeat resonates across infinite strings. Think of joy in this light. When you smile at a stranger, you believe it ends there. But in truth, that gesture ripples across the net, touching lives you cannot see. A kind act is never small because its reflection multiplies endlessly. This means that your healing, too, is not only yours. Each time you soften into peace, each time you transform a wound into compassion, you alter the reflections in countless other jewels. Someone you will never meet may feel lighter because you dared to heal. This is why Buddhist masters stress interconnection, not as a theory but as liberation. When you see yourself as separate, you carry pain as a personal curse. When you see yourself as part of Indra's net, you carry it as part of the shared human story. You do not ask, "Why me?" but "How can this suffering connect me more deeply?" That shift transforms pain from a hidden burden into a hidden bridge. Even nature reveals this truth. A forest is not just a collection of trees. Underground, roots are intertwined in a vast web, sharing nutrients, water, and even warnings of danger. A sick tree is supported by the health of others, while strong trees lend their strength to weaker ones. The forest survives through interconnection, just as you do. When you feel cut off, it is only the illusion of separation. Your roots are still touching countless others, even if you cannot see them. Consider how loneliness melts when you allow yourself to feel this. Instead of asking, "Does anyone care?" you begin to ask, "How is this pain reflected in others? Who else carries this ache right now?" In that question, loneliness becomes less of a prison and more of a doorway. And through that doorway flows compassion, both for yourself and for those countless others reflected in your jewel. Hidden wounds heal in this field of recognition. The act of seeing yourself as part of something infinite loosens the grip of shame. Because if every jewel carries cracks, then your cracks are not flaws but reflections of reality itself. In fact, it is through the cracks that the light of others enters. To hide them would be to dim the brilliance of the net. To reveal them is to allow healing to flow. Even suffering that feels unbearable softens under this vision. Heartbreak, grief, betrayal. These experiences often drive us deeper into the illusion of isolation. But Indra's net reframes them. Heartbreak is not yours alone. It is a universal song sung in a million keys. Grief is not your prison. It is humanity's river flowing through you. Betrayal is not your solitary scar. It is a wound reflected across time. When you see it this way, you stop asking why you were singled out and begin to feel the quiet truth. You are never singled out. You are always part of the whole. This doesn't erase the sting of pain, but it changes its meaning. And meaning is what turns suffering into healing. A wound without meaning festers. A wound understood as shared becomes a source of connection. This is why hidden pain begins to dissolve when you see yourself inside Indra's net. What once felt unbearable now feels like part of the human fabric. You are not cursed, you are connected. In daily life, you can practice this by noticing reflections. When you see someone smile, remind yourself their joy reflects yours. When you see someone in pain, let their suffering remind you of your own tenderness. In both directions, recognize the mirror. This practice changes how you move through the world. You stop feeling cut off, and you begin to feel joined, woven into something infinite and luminous. Healing hidden pain is not about erasing it, it is about seeing it in its true context. Alone, your suffering feels endless. But in the light of Indra's net, your suffering becomes one reflection among countless others, held in the embrace of all beings. That realization doesn't make your wounds vanish, but it does make them lighter, softer, easier to hold. And over time, that softness becomes peace. The teaching of Indra's net shows that every being's joy and every being's suffering ripple across the whole. When you heal, the world heals. When you suffer, you are never alone. And when you see this, loneliness dissolves into connection, and hidden pain finds the space to transform. This is the radical interconnection the sutras spoke of, and it is waiting for you tonight, as the net of stars shines above, reflecting back to you what has always been true. You are part of everything, and everything is part of you. As the truth of Indra's net sinks deeper, something else quietly arises. If all beings are connected, if our joys and sorrows ripple endlessly through one another, then how do we actually hold that knowledge in our daily lives? Not everything can be spoken. Not every wound responds to words. Sometimes speech makes the pain heavier, twisting it into arguments, judgments, or explanations that only deepen the cut. There is another way, one that has been overlooked but carries immense power, the way of noble silence. Noble silence is not simply the act of closing the mouth. It is not the silence of repression, nor the silence of indifference. It is a silence that carries awareness, compassion, and presence. In the Buddhist path, silence is medicine. It heals where words cannot reach, and it restores balance where sound has become noise. To step into this kind of silence is to enter a field where pain loosens without being forced, where wounds soften without being named. When we suffer, the instinct is often to speak it out, to tell, to explain, to make others understand. There is relief in expression, but expression has limits. Words can trap pain into stories, replaying it again and again, making it sharper with every telling. Silence, when held with mindfulness, does the opposite. It allows pain to breathe without clinging to it. In the stillness, suffering can shift from being an identity to being a passing experience. The storm is still there, but it no longer defines the sky. Silence, in this sense, is active. It is a practice of listening deeply, first to oneself and then to others. It is hearing the currents of thought and emotion beneath the surface without rushing to name or solve them. Many people mistake silence for emptiness, but in the Buddhist tradition, it is full. It is filled with space, awareness, and the gentle touch of compassion. It is the still water that reflects the whole sky. The Buddha himself often taught through silence. In the ancient texts, there are moments when disciples asked him questions, and instead of offering doctrines, he remained quiet. This was not avoidance, it was teaching. The silence carried meaning beyond language, a reminder that some truths cannot be captured in concepts. The deepest healing does not come from explanations, it comes from direct experience, from resting in the presence of awareness itself. Think about how many conflicts could dissolve if silence was honored. Words, when used in anger, cut deeper than knives. Families split, friendships collapse, hearts break under the weight of careless speech. In these moments, noble silence is not weakness, but strength. To remain silent is to refuse to add fuel to the fire. It is to step out of the cycle of reaction and create space for peace to emerge. Silence becomes a shield and a balm, protecting both yourself and others from unnecessary harm. This silence also applies inwardly. Much of our hidden pain comes from the constant chatter of the mind. Thoughts repeat like broken records. Why did this happen? What if I had done differently? Will I ever be free? Noble silence addresses this not by forcefully shutting the mind, but by observing without feeding it. When you rest in silence, the thoughts begin to lose their grip. The endless commentary quiets, and the wound is no longer scratched open by constant mental words. In that quiet, healing takes root. In Buddhist monasteries, silence is often practiced collectively. Entire communities move, work, and eat without speaking. At first, this can feel strange or even uncomfortable, but over time, it reveals its depth. When the noise of speech fades, other senses awaken. You notice the sound of footsteps on the earth, the rhythm of breath, the taste of food. Life itself begins to speak through silence, and that presence is profoundly healing. Pain that felt unbearable begins to soften in the space created by this quiet attentiveness. Silence is also an act of respect. When someone else suffers, rushing to fill the air with advice or explanations often closes the door to true connection. But sitting in silence with another, holding space without the need to fix, is one of the deepest gifts you can give. That presence tells the other person, your pain is safe here. It does not need to be justified. It does not need to be dressed in words. In that silence, they can finally breathe, and sometimes that breath is all that is needed for the first layer of healing to begin. There is also a sacred dimension to noble silence. In silence, the boundaries between self and world blur. You become aware not only of your inner currents, but of the subtle rhythms around you, the wind, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. This communion dissolves loneliness at its root. You realize you are not alone because you are never separate. Even when no human voice is near, silence reveals the voices of the earth, the sky, the unseen connections that hold you. Hidden pain often thrives in noise, distractions, chatter, endless streams of information. These drown out the quiet where healing waits. By stepping into silence, you allow what has been buried to rise gently to the surface. The pain comes not as a violent eruption, but as a tender stirring, a chance to finally be felt without judgment. This is not silence as escape, but silence as courage, the bravery to meet what words have always tried to cover. When practiced regularly, noble silence transforms daily life. Instead of reacting instantly in conversations, you pause, you breathe, you listen. Instead of drowning every free moment with sound, you allow quiet to enter. Over time, you discover that silence is not empty, it is alive. It carries wisdom that cannot be heard through noise. The heart learns to rest, the mind learns to settle, and the body begins to release the tension it has carried. Silence also nurtures clarity. In the stillness, decisions become clearer, priorities settle into place. Pain that felt overwhelming begins to reveal its lessons. Sometimes the wound is not meant to be analyzed but witnessed. In silence, you become the witness, and the wound begins to release its hold. Healing does not always require answers. Often, it requires only the space to unfold naturally. The practice of noble silence can be integrated in simple ways. Begin with small periods each day where you choose not to speak, not to engage in noise, not even to flood yourself with screens or music. Use that time to listen to your breath, to your body, to the subtle stirrings of your mind. At first, restlessness may arise. This is normal. The mind, addicted to sound, resists the stillness. But with patience, a new depth reveals itself. Silence stops being uncomfortable and begins to feel like home. In relationships, silence can become a sanctuary. Instead of forcing conversations when tensions rise, you can invite silence. Sit together without words, allowing emotions to settle before they harden into conflict. This is not avoidance. It is wisdom. Silence gives both people the space to see clearly and return with compassion instead of anger. Over time, this practice builds trust, because silence shared without fear becomes a bond stronger than speech. There is also a deeper silence, the silence of meditation. When the mind grows still enough, even thoughts fall away, and what remains is pure awareness, silent, boundless, free. In this silence, hidden pain dissolves not because it is solved, but because it is seen as part of a larger whole. The small self, with all its wounds and stories, is revealed as a passing reflection. Awareness itself has never been wounded. Resting in that silence, you touch a peace beyond words, a peace that cannot be broken. Noble silence teaches us that not all pain needs expression. Some pain needs stillness, presence, and space. Words often seek to control or explain suffering, but silence allows it to transform naturally. In silence, you do not fight your wounds. You do not hide them, you let them breathe in the open air of awareness until they find their own way to healing. The world today is filled with noise, and in that noise, hidden pain multiplies. To return to silence is a radical act, a way of reclaiming your own heart from the chaos. It is choosing to heal, not by doing more, but by allowing less. In silence, peace is not created, it is uncovered. The stillness reveals that beneath all wounds, beneath all noise, there has always been a quiet center untouched by pain. Resting there, healing becomes natural, inevitable, complete. Silence, when held with awareness, teaches that healing does not always require words. In that stillness, the heart learns to release its grip. The mind loosens its restless stories, and wounds begin to soften on their own. Yet silence alone does not complete the path. Out of that stillness arises another medicine, one so simple it is often overlooked. A curve of the lips, a soft light in the eyes, a gesture so small yet carrying the weight of liberation itself, the act of smiling. The smile in Buddhist teachings is not a performance. It is not forced cheer or social politeness. It is a subtle radiance, a reflection of freedom from within. When the Buddha is shown with a serene smile, it is not because he escaped suffering, but because he saw through its illusions. That gentle expression reveals a mind that no longer clings, a heart that rests in peace, and a presence that offers healing without a single word. The smile is the embodiment of noble silence, transformed into joy. A genuine smile carries energy that cannot be measured by surface logic. Neuroscience today confirms that smiling softens the nervous system, calms stress hormones, and gently rewires the brain toward ease. But beyond the science, the Dharma points to a deeper truth. The act of smiling, even in the face of despair, is a radical statement. It is saying, I am not owned by this pain. The hidden despair that feeds on heaviness loses its grip when the lips release into a smile born from awareness. This kind of smile is not denial. It does not reject sadness or hide wounds under a mask. Instead, it allows both joy and sorrow to coexist in a larger field. To smile while holding grief is to say yes to life as it is, without being crushed by it. It is the art of carrying suffering lightly, without letting it define the entirety of your being. In this sense, the smile becomes an act of freedom, a refusal to be enslaved by despair. Smiling is also contagious, and here the teaching of Indra's net echoes again. When one jewel shines, the others reflect its light. A single smile offered sincerely can ripple through the hearts of many, shifting moods, softening tensions, and opening doors that words could never unlock. A smile directed at a stranger can dissolve the invisible walls of loneliness. In relationships weighed down by unspoken heaviness, a smile can remind both people of the possibility of tenderness. Its medicine is subtle, yet its reach is vast. The Buddha's smile is often described as knowing a recognition that everything is impermanent, that suffering rises and falls, and that clinging is the root of despair. To see this clearly is to no longer be trapped. The smile reflects this freedom. It does not come from ignoring life's difficulties, but from resting in the truth that difficulties themselves are passing clouds. The hidden despair that insists this will never end weakens in the presence of a smile that knows everything changes. There is also courage in smiling. In times of pain, it may feel easier to harden, to close off, to retreat behind a wall of seriousness. Smiling, however, requires vulnerability. It opens the face, it exposes the heart, it declares to the world that hope still lives here. That vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. It takes great courage to smile when despair would rather you collapse. And in that courage lies liberation. To practice smiling in daily life is to cultivate a small but powerful ritual. Begin not by forcing joy, but by relaxing the face, softening the breath, and allowing a gentle curve to rise naturally. Even if the heart is heavy, the act itself invites the body and mind to remember peace. Monks in the Zen tradition sometimes practice half-smiling during meditation, a subtle expression that reflects inner ease. This is not about pretending, it is about aligning the body with the possibility of lightness. Over time, that possibility grows into reality. Smiling also transforms how we meet others. A face marked by constant strain creates distance. A smile creates approachability, a silent invitation to connect. In a world where hidden despair often hides behind masks of indifference, a genuine smile can remind others of their own forgotten joy. The act becomes a gift, not only to oneself but to everyone who encounters it. Each smile plants a seed of ease in the collective field, and those seeds bloom in ways we may never see. Hidden despair often thrives because it convinces us that life is only suffering, that joy is out of reach. The Dharma counters with a radical proposal. Joy is always present, even in small, subtle forms. The smile is a doorway into that truth. When you allow yourself to smile, you affirm that despair does not have the final word. You uncover joy that was hidden beneath layers of thought. This is not escapism, it is liberation through recognition. Smiling also bridges silence and speech. It communicates without words, yet carries meaning deeper than sentences. A smile can say, "I understand," more fully than 1,000 explanations. It can offer comfort without analysis, hope without argument. In this way, it is an extension of noble silence, a silence made visible. Where words may deepen wounds, a smile can heal without stirring the pain. The practice of smiling has roots in mindfulness. To smile mindfully is to become aware of the present moment and to welcome it with softness. This doesn't mean the moment is perfect, it means you meet it with openness rather than resistance. That openness itself generates peace. Each mindful smile is a declaration, "This moment is enough." Over time, these small declarations accumulate into a life lived with greater ease. The Buddha's smile also teaches humility. It is not the smile of conquest, of superiority, or of forced optimism. It is the quiet smile of someone who has let go. Hidden despair often comes from the weight of trying to control what cannot be controlled, from clinging to outcomes, from resisting impermanence. The smile releases that struggle. It reflects a heart that no longer needs to grip so tightly, and in that release, despair finds no foothold. In modern life, where stress and heaviness dominate, the act of smiling can feel almost rebellious. To walk into a room burdened with worry and still offer a smile is to introduce a new energy. That energy disrupts the cycle of despair. Even if no one else notices, your own nervous system notices. The heart recognizes the signal. There is still space for lightness here. Over time, this small practice becomes a radical stance against the culture of despair. A smile also reminds us of our shared humanity. No matter how different our lives, the ability to smile unites us. Across languages, cultures, and generations, a smile is understood. It requires no translation. It dissolves barriers that words cannot. In this way, smiling embodies compassion itself, the recognition of our shared experience, the gentle reminder that we are not separate. For those carrying hidden despair, smiling may feel unnatural at first. But this is where practice matters. Just as silence requires patience, smiling requires trust. Each time you allow a smile to arise, even if only briefly, you are training the heart to remember its natural state of ease. Over time, despair loses its absolute grip. The mind begins to see that joy is not gone, only hidden, waiting to be uncovered by the simplest of gestures. The Dharma of smiling teaches that healing does not always come through struggle. Sometimes it comes through softness, through allowing lightness to coexist with pain. A smile does not erase wounds, but it shifts how we hold them. Instead of crushing weight, they become part of a larger tapestry where joy still shines. This shift is subtle, but its impact is profound. To carry a smile as practice is to carry medicine with you always. It is available in every moment, requiring nothing but the willingness to soften. It restores balance when life feels too heavy, and it spreads ease into the world around you. In its simplicity lies its power. The Buddha's smile has endured for centuries because it is more than an expression, it is a teaching. It shows us that freedom is not somewhere far away, but here, in the way we choose to meet each moment. And in that smile rests the medicine of lightness, dissolving hidden despair and opening the door to peace. The soft medicine of a smile shows us that liberation can be carried in the smallest gestures. Where silence gave space and smiling brought lightness, there is yet another path that works in an entirely different way through sound itself. For centuries, in monasteries and temples, monks have practiced what is known as parita, protective chanting. These chants are rarely spoken of outside those sacred walls, yet they hold a subtle power, the ability to heal through vibration, to calm the restless mind, and to bring peace where hidden pain lingers unspoken. Chanting in Buddhism is not performance, nor is it entertainment. It is a practice of resonance, of aligning body, breath, and mind with rhythms that carry centuries of accumulated devotion. The sound becomes more than words, it becomes energy. Those who have sat within the walls of a chanting hall often speak of a shift that cannot be explained by meaning alone. Even if the language is unknown, the vibration touches something beyond intellect, softening the heart, quieting fear, and easing the weight of despair. Parita chants are considered protective, not because they create walls against the world, but because they generate harmony within. Hidden pain thrives in dissonance, the clashing of thoughts, the restless repetition of inner stories, the tension in the body that never fully relaxes. The slow, steady rhythm of chanting dissolves this inner conflict. As the voice repeats ancient syllables, the breath deepens, the nervous system calms, and the mind is gently led away from chaos. What remains is a sense of being held, as if wrapped in sound itself. The healing nature of parita can be understood through both spiritual and scientific perspectives. Spiritually, these chants are imbued with intention. Monks dedicate the sound to the well-being of all beings, weaving compassion into every note. When the sound enters your body, it carries that intention, like a current flowing into hidden wounds. Scientifically, studies on chanting and mantra meditation show that repetition of sound slows brain waves, reduces stress hormones, and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This shift allows the body to enter states of rest and repair, where healing becomes possible. For those carrying hidden pain, chanting offers something unique. It bypasses the need to explain or analyze. Words often entangle us in the story of suffering. Sound, stripped of narrative, goes deeper. It reaches the body directly, bypassing the chatter of the mind. Pain stored in muscles, in breath patterns, in the chest that feels too tight to expand, these begin to release as the vibration passes through. The chant becomes a balm not through meaning, but through resonance. The practice is communal in its traditional form, and that adds another layer of healing. Sitting among others, surrounded by waves of sound, one feels part of something vast. Loneliness dissolves, not through conversation, but through shared vibration. The heart senses that it is not isolated. It is part of a field of energy held together by voice, breath, and intention. In this way, chanting carries the same interconnection as Indra's net, but expressed through sound. Parita is also considered protective because it reshapes the mind's relationship to fear. Hidden pain often festers because fear surrounds it. Fear of being hurt again, fear of the future, fear of facing what lies buried. The steady cadence of chanting trains the mind to rest in rhythms of safety. The repetition is like a lullaby, reminding the nervous system that it is not under threat. Over time, the grip of fear weakens, and the mind learns to settle into peace more naturally. In temples, Parita chants are often performed during times of crisis, when illness strikes, when families suffer, when communities face uncertainty. People gather not to discuss solutions but to be bathed in sound. The healing comes not only from the chants themselves, but from the shared act of surrendering to them. To sit quietly while others chant is to allow yourself to be carried, to let go of the burden of control, and to trust in the power of sound to do what words cannot. The practice also awakens mindfulness in a unique way. Each syllable requires attention. Each breath must align with the rhythm. The mind, instead of wandering, is anchored to the sound. This focus is gentle, unlike the tight grip of concentration. It is more like floating on a current than forcing the mind to stay still. This kind of mindfulness has its own healing effect, because when awareness is steady, the stories of suffering lose their power. Another layer of Parita's subtle medicine is its connection to tradition. The chants have been passed down for centuries, repeated countless times by countless voices. To chant them is to link yourself to that lineage of practice, to join a stream that has carried healing for generations. Hidden pain often makes us feel cut off from time itself, as though our suffering is an isolated event. Chanting restores continuity. It reminds us that we are part of a long human journey, and that others have carried pain before us and transformed it through these very sounds. In daily life, one does not need to be a monk to benefit from this practice. Simple chanting, even of short mantras or phrases, carries the same essence. The sound, Buddho, repeated slowly, can settle the mind. The phrase, Sabbe Sata Sukhi Hontu, may all beings be happy, sung gently, can shift the heart. It is not the complexity of the words that matters, but the sincerity with which they are repeated. What matters is the willingness to let sound become medicine. Chanting also teaches us something about surrender. To enter the rhythm, you let go of the need to control. The sound carries you. You do not have to carry it. For those who live with hidden pain, always striving to manage or suppress it, this surrender is deeply healing. It is a reminder that not everything requires effort. Sometimes healing happens when we stop trying to fix and allow ourselves to be held by something larger. Even listening to chants can be transformative. The vibrations enter through the ear, resonate in the body, and shift the state of mind. You do not need to understand the language. The healing is not in the intellectual meaning, but in the energetic field created. Just as the body responds to music without needing analysis, it responds to chanting on levels beyond conscious thought. The protective aspect of Parita also speaks to the unseen. The tradition holds that chanting generates fields of positive energy that shield the mind from harmful influences, both internal and external. Whether one interprets this in mystical terms or psychological ones, the effect is real. Hidden pain often leaves us vulnerable, raw, and open to more suffering. Chanting creates an inner stability, a shield of calm that protects against being overwhelmed. Over time, the practice of chanting can rewire how we experience ourselves. The sound becomes an anchor, a reminder that beneath the surface of pain there is rhythm, harmony, and peace. The repetition strengthens neural pathways of calm rather than anxiety, teaching the body and mind a new way of being. Healing then becomes less about effort and more about allowing these rhythms to sink deeper until they shape the very ground of our experience. Parita reveals a profound truth. Healing is not always about silence or words, but sometimes about sound itself. A sound rooted in compassion, repeated with intention, becomes more than vibration, it becomes a force of transformation. Where despair was heavy, chanting introduces lightness. Where fear was sharp, chanting introduces calm. Where loneliness was suffocating, chanting reminds us of our shared human song. Hidden pain does not need to remain hidden. Through the subtle power of Parita, it can be met, held, and transformed. Not by explaining it, not by analyzing it, but by letting the body and mind bathe in rhythms older than memory. In these chants, there is protection, there is peace, and there is the quiet assurance that even in the darkest places, healing is still possible through the simplest of sounds. The gentle waves of chanting reveal how sound itself can soothe hidden wounds and protect the mind from restless storms. Yet sound is only one form of nourishment that shapes who we are. Just as the body depends on food to survive, the heart and mind are constantly fed by subtler forms of intake. Not all of this nourishment is wholesome. Some of it strengthens, some of it poisons. This is why the Buddha spoke of the 4 nutriments, teachings that uncover how invisible forms of food shape our suffering and our peace. These 4 kinds of nourishment go far beyond the meals placed on the table. They include everything we consume through body, mind, and senses. What we take in through conversations, through the media we absorb, through the emotions we linger in, these are also food. And just as rotten food sickens the body, unwholesome nutriments sicken the heart. To understand them is to uncover how much of our hidden pain is quietly fed each day, often without our awareness. The first nutriment is edible food, the most obvious but not the only one. The Buddha reminded us that even physical food is not separate from mind. What we eat affects not only health but clarity. Heavy, excessive, or careless eating makes the body restless, clouds the mind, and fuels attachment. Eating with mindfulness transforms food into healing, because awareness turns a simple act into a ritual of gratitude. Each bite, when taken with care, becomes a bridge to the present, a reminder that nourishment is sacred. Hidden pain often expresses itself through unconscious eating, using food to numb emotions, to fill emptiness that food can never truly satisfy. To eat mindfully is to break this cycle, giving the body what it needs while allowing the heart to feel what lies beneath. The second nutriment is sense impressions. Every sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch enters the mind like food enters the body. A harsh word is food. A violent image is food. Endless scrolling on screens is food. These impressions do not vanish once consumed. They linger, shaping mood, thought, and memory. Much of our invisible pain grows from this source. When the senses are constantly bombarded by negativity, comparison, and fear, the mind begins to carry those toxins as if they were its own. This is why mindfulness of consumption extends beyond meals. It asks us, what do you allow into your eyes and ears each day? What conversations do you repeatedly feed on? What kind of environments do you choose to sit in? Even silence can be nourishing if filled with calm impressions, like the sound of wind through leaves or the stillness of dawn. But when silence is filled with noise from within, criticism, rumination, replayed arguments, it becomes poison. Protecting sense impressions is not about withdrawal from life, but about discerning which impressions strengthen peace and which feed despair. The third nutriment is volition, or will. This is the energy of desire that propels action. It too feeds us. When volition is rooted in compassion, patience, or wisdom, it nourishes strength. But when rooted in craving, anger, or fear, it becomes a destructive diet. Hidden pain often grows from toxic volition, the inner push to prove, to grasp, to become something at all costs. These forces exhaust the spirit, creating restlessness and dissatisfaction. The Buddha compared unhealthy volition to eating burning coals. It drives us forward, but it destroys from within. To heal through volition requires turning attention to the quality of desire that fuels life. Ask, what am I living for? Am I fed by fear of being unworthy, by craving for status, by the need to escape? Or am I fed by the wish to live peacefully, to help, to awaken? The energy of purpose is food, and it will either nourish or wound, depending on what drives it. When hidden pain feels constant, it is often because the will is caught in cycles of striving that can never satisfy. By shifting intention, by aligning volition with compassion and balance, the inner diet becomes medicine. The fourth nutriment is consciousness itself. Every moment of awareness is shaped by what it contacts. The Buddha taught that consciousness is like a seed, and what we feed it determines what grows. If the seed is watered with anger, anger flourishes. If watered with mindfulness, mindfulness deepens. Consciousness is not passive. It is always taking in, always digesting. The hidden pain many carry is often the fruit of seeds watered unconsciously for years, resentments replayed, fears rehearsed, doubts repeated. To change the nutriment of consciousness is to choose carefully which seeds we water, which states of mind we dwell on, and which we allow to fade. When viewed together, the four nutriments form a map of responsibility. They remind us that suffering is not random, it is fed. And healing is not mysterious. It begins with changing what we feed ourselves. Just as one who is sick improves with better diet, one who suffers secretly improves with better inner nourishment. The Buddha's teaching is not blame, it is empowerment. If pain is fed, then peace too can be fed. If despair grows from toxic food, then joy can grow from wholesome food. To apply these teachings requires awareness in the small choices of daily life. Before eating, pause. Before turning on a screen, pause. Before following a thought, pause. Each pause creates space to ask, does this nourish peace or does it nourish pain? Over time, these pauses accumulate into transformation. The hidden wounds that once felt permanent begin to weaken because they are no longer fed. Healing begins not by force, but by starving what harms and feeding what heals. There is also compassion in this teaching. To see that others are also fed by nutriments explains much of human behavior. Someone caught in anger is feeding on toxic impressions. Someone lost in despair may be driven by unhealthy volition. Recognizing this softens judgment. Instead of blaming, we see the diet of the heart, and with that vision comes understanding. Just as one would not scorn a body weakened by poor food, one need not scorn a mind weakened by poor nutriments. Compassion becomes the natural response. This teaching also addresses the modern world with striking clarity. Today, more than ever, we are surrounded by endless streams of impressions. Media, advertisements, conversations, and pressures constantly feed the senses. Much of it is designed not to nourish, but to provoke craving, fear, or comparison. The Buddha's guidance is urgent here. Be mindful of what you consume. Invisible pain grows in proportion to the toxins consumed. Freedom grows in proportion to the wholesome inputs cultivated. Mindful living becomes a diet of the heart. Choosing uplifting conversations instead of gossip, choosing art that calms instead of media that agitates, choosing silence over empty noise, each choice is a meal for the mind. Just as the body reflects the food it eats, the mind reflects the nutriments it consumes. Over time, a mind fed on peace becomes peaceful. A mind fed on compassion becomes compassionate. The teaching of the four nutriments is ultimately about reclaiming agency. Hidden pain often convinces us we are powerless, victims of circumstance. But these teachings remind us we can choose what we feed the mind and heart. Each day, in small ways, we decide whether to feed despair or to feed peace. This power is subtle, but it is transformative. Nourishment is ongoing, and with awareness, it becomes the foundation of healing. Through this teaching, invisible pain becomes visible. Its roots are traced back to the daily diet of impressions, desires, and consciousness itself, and in that recognition lies freedom. The cycle can change. Healing is not distant. It begins with the next choice of what to take in. In this way, the Buddha offered a teaching both profound and practical. Tend carefully to the nutriments of life, and peace will naturally follow. When the teaching of the four nutriments shows that pain is often fed by what we consume, it naturally leads to a deeper question. Who is it that eats? Who is it that suffers? And what exactly is being nourished? Beneath the daily choices of food, impressions, and desires lies the very structure of what we call self. The Buddha revealed that this self, which seems so solid, is in fact a collection of parts, 5 aggregates that come together temporarily. These are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. They are known as the skandhas, and our hidden pain is often born not from what they are, but from clinging to them as if they were permanent or truly me. Form is the body, the material shape, the physical vessel through which we experience life. To mistake form as permanent is to suffer endlessly. Bodies age, weaken, and shift. Hidden pain grows when we cling to youth, beauty, or strength as if they could be frozen in time. Even subtle dissatisfaction with appearance or health springs from this misunderstanding. The body is real in the sense that it functions, but it is not a fixed identity. To see form as fluid dissolves much hidden tension. One can care for the body with compassion without mistaking it for the essence of who we are. Feeling is the second aggregate, the raw tone of experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Much suffering hides here because people confuse feelings with truth. A painful feeling is mistaken as a permanent reality, and despair grows. A pleasant feeling is clung to as if it could last forever, and disappointment follows when it fades. Even neutral feelings create restlessness, leading to the search for stimulation to escape boredom. Hidden pain deepens when life is seen through the lens of chasing or avoiding feelings. To recognize that feelings arise and pass like ripples on water allows one to step back from their tyranny. They are part of experience, but not the entirety of existence. Perception is the third aggregate, the capacity to recognize and label. It allows us to know, this is warm, this is my friend, this is danger. Yet perception is not always accurate. It is colored by memory, habit, and expectation. Much hidden pain arises because perception builds illusions. A word from someone may be perceived as insult even when none was intended. A memory of past betrayal colors perception of new relationships, causing suspicion where trust could have grown. These distortions feed suffering silently, convincing us of realities that may not exist. The Buddha taught that perception is useful but limited. To cling to it as absolute truth is to invite illusion. Mental formations, the fourth aggregate, are the habits, thoughts, and intentions that shape action. They are like the soil in which seeds of behavior grow. Hidden pain often roots itself here. Negative formations, such as resentment, envy, or self-doubt, form patterns that repeat, reinforcing suffering each time they arise. Even seemingly small formations like constant self-criticism become chains that bind us. Yet mental formations are not fixed. They can be reshaped through mindfulness and compassion. To see them clearly is to begin the work of transformation. Without awareness, they operate in the shadows, producing hidden pain without end. Consciousness, the fifth aggregate, is the stream of awareness that registers form, feeling, perception, and formations. It is like the stage upon which all experience appears. Consciousness itself is not solid or unchanging. It shifts moment by moment, conditioned by what it contacts. Hidden pain becomes stronger when one clings to consciousness as if it were a permanent self, believing, I am this awareness, fixed and eternal. The Buddha revealed that consciousness too is conditioned, arising with objects and passing with them. Freedom comes not by rejecting consciousness, but by recognizing its impermanence. Together, these five aggregates create the sense of I. But they are not self, they are processes. Hidden pain arises when we mistake them for something permanent and unchanging. We say, my body, my feelings, my thoughts, as though they were possessions or identities, yet they shift constantly, never holding still. The illusion of self, built on the aggregates, is the root of much suffering. The Buddha's teaching was not to deny the aggregates, but to see them clearly, without clinging. Clinging to form often leads to hidden insecurities about appearance, health, or aging. Clinging to feeling creates cycles of craving and aversion that exhaust the spirit. Clinging to perception locks us into distorted stories about ourselves and others. Clinging to mental formations keeps us trapped in destructive habits. Clinging to consciousness makes us believe there is a solid core self that must be defended. Each form of clinging multiplies pain because it fights against the truth of impermanence. Awareness of the aggregates, however, opens the door to liberation. By examining them closely, we begin to see that what we call me is a dynamic process. The body changes, feelings shift, perceptions alter, formations evolve, and consciousness flows. Hidden pain dissolves when we stop demanding permanence from what is by nature impermanent. This insight is not cold detachment, it is freedom. It allows us to live fully without being enslaved by illusions. This teaching also sheds light on relationships. Much hidden suffering arises from clinging to how others appear, feel, or act. We mistake their aggregates as fixed identities, but when we see that they too are processes, not solid selves, compassion grows. A harsh word is understood as a passing formation, not the essence of a person. A moment of joy in another is recognized as part of a shifting flow, not as something to envy. Seeing others through the lens of the aggregates dissolves judgments and softens anger, reducing hidden pain in connection with them. In meditation, observing the aggregates becomes direct practice. Watching the body breathe reveals form as process. Noticing a sensation of restlessness reveals feeling as fleeting. Observing the labeling mind shows perception in action. Recognizing recurring thoughts shows mental formations arising and passing. And behind it all, the stream of consciousness holds these without permanence. This practice loosens the grip of self-identification. Pain is still felt, but it is no longer bound to me in the same way. It becomes part of the flow, easier to release. The teaching of the aggregates also reveals why identity-based suffering is so strong. People cling to labels, race, gender, role, personality, as though they were the essence of self. But these labels are stitched together from aggregates, all impermanent. When identity is mistaken for a fixed truth, hidden pain follows, because life constantly disrupts that illusion. Freedom comes when identity is seen as provisional, not absolute. One can still live, love, and act, but without being trapped by rigid definitions. The aggregates explain not only personal pain but also collective suffering. Communities and nations cling to forms, perceptions, and formations as if they were permanent truths. Conflict arises from defending illusions. Recognizing the aggregates at a collective level offers the possibility of peace, because it reveals the constructed nature of division. Hidden pain in society mirrors hidden pain in the individual it grows, from clinging to what is impermanent and mistaking it for self. Healing hidden pain through the aggregates is a path of deep honesty. It asks us to examine what we take to be most intimate, our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts, and to see them as processes, not possessions. This can feel unsettling at first because the sense of I loosens, but in that loosening lies liberation. When nothing is solid, nothing can be truly threatened. Pain is still present, but its weight is lighter, its hold less absolute. The Buddha compared the aggregates to a chariot. The chariot is not one part, but the coming together of wheels, axles, frame, and harness. Likewise, the self is not one thing, but the coming together of aggregates. To cling to the chariot as permanent would be folly, just as to cling to the self as fixed is illusion. When we see this clearly, hidden pain rooted in clinging loses its foundation. In daily life, reflection on the aggregates can transform ordinary moments. A craving for praise can be seen as a feeling, not the essence of self. A sudden anger can be recognized as a formation, not as my permanent nature. A perception of threat can be examined and released when found inaccurate. Each recognition cuts through illusion and softens suffering. Over time, these small insights accumulate into a profound shift. The sense of self is no longer a prison, but a fluid dance of changing parts. The Dharma of the aggregates shows that hidden pain is often hidden illusion. We suffer not because the aggregates exist, but because we cling to them as if they were something they are not. To unpack them is to see reality more clearly. To stop clinging is to step into freedom. This freedom does not erase life's challenges, but it changes our relationship to them. Without the weight of illusion, suffering loses much of its sting. And in that release, peace emerges quiet, spacious, and real. When the truth of the aggregates reveals that what we cling to is never solid, another question naturally rises. How then do we meet the waves of life? Bodies shift, feelings rise and fall, perceptions mislead, mental habits repeat, and consciousness flows without pause. To see these clearly can bring relief, but it can also leave us exposed to storms of emotion. Joy comes, then vanishes. Anger burns, then cools. Grief swells without warning. If we cannot hold on to anything, how do we find stability? The answer is found in a practice often forgotten, yet central to the Buddha's path, upekkha, equanimity. Equanimity is not coldness, It is not detachment that withdraws from life. It is the steady heart that remains balanced even as emotions move like weather across the sky. This balance is not indifference. It is care without clinging, openness without drowning. To cultivate equanimity is to cultivate the ability to stay steady while feeling fully. It is the art of being present in joy without grasping, present in pain without collapsing, present in uncertainty without fear. Hidden pain often grows because emotions are either suppressed or exaggerated. Suppression pushes them down, where they ferment and harden into unspoken wounds. Exaggeration amplifies them, fueling reactions that bring more suffering. Equanimity dissolves both extremes. It allows feelings to arise, to be seen, and to pass without either pushing them away or being swept away by them. This is why upekkha is medicine for emotional storms. It holds space for the full truth of experience while protecting the heart from imbalance. Equanimity rests on the wisdom of impermanence. Every emotion, no matter how powerful, has a beginning, a peak, and an end. Fear feels overwhelming until it fades. Joy feels endless until it shifts. Anger seems absolute until it softens. The hidden pain of emotions comes not from their presence, but from believing they will last forever or that they define who we are. Equanimity remembers, this too will change. With that remembrance, the storm is weathered without fear. The Buddha described equanimity as one of the four immeasurable states of the heart, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. Without equanimity, these qualities can become unbalanced. Loving kindness can burn out into attachment, compassion can collapse into despair, joy for others can twist into envy. Equanimity keeps them steady, like the deep roots that hold a tree firm when winds rise. Hidden pain often comes from imbalance in the heart, caring too much until one is crushed, or closing off to avoid being hurt. Upekkha dissolves both tendencies by providing balance without indifference. To practice equanimity is to train the mind to see all beings, including oneself, as subject to causes and conditions. Everyone acts from their aggregates, from nutriments, from patterns they may not even understand. With this understanding, anger softens. The harsh words of another are seen as the fruit of their conditions, not as a permanent mark of their essence. Likewise, our own mistakes are seen not as fixed flaws but as the result of conditions that can change. This vision dissolves hidden pain born of judgment, both of self and others. Equanimity also transforms how we meet success and failure. Hidden pain often lurks in the shadows of both. Success creates fear of loss, while failure breeds shame. Equanimity holds both outcomes lightly. It recognizes that success is pleasant but temporary, failure is painful but also temporary, and neither defines the depth of our being. This balance frees us from the inner turbulence of self-worth tied to achievement. With upekkha, peace is not dependent on outcomes but flows from inner steadiness. In relationships, equanimity is a shield against emotional entanglement that wounds. To love without balance can lead to clinging, control, and disappointment. To detach completely creates distance and loneliness. Equanimity walks the middle path. It allows deep care without trying to possess or change others. It allows empathy without drowning in another's suffering. In this way, equanimity becomes the foundation of healthy love, love that supports, not suffocates. Hidden pain often comes from resistance to what is beyond control. Equanimity releases this resistance. It accepts that life includes birth and death, gain and loss, praise and blame, joy and sorrow. These pairs are the natural currents of existence. To fight them is to exhaust the spirit. To accept them with balance is to rest in peace even when storms rage. This acceptance is not passive, it is active wisdom. a conscious choice to rest in stability rather than chase control. Equanimity also addresses the hidden pain of injustice. When faced with cruelty or unfairness, the heart naturally burns. Without balance, this fire turns into bitterness or despair. With upekkha, the fire is transformed into clarity and strength. Equanimity does not deny wrongs. It prevents being consumed by them. It allows action to arise from wisdom rather than reactivity. This is how equanimity heals not only personal wounds, but also the wounds of society. It creates space for compassionate action without the poison of hatred. The practice of equanimity can be cultivated through meditation and daily mindfulness. In meditation, one observes sensations, thoughts, and emotions arise and pass without clinging or aversion. The breath becomes an anchor, reminding us of the rhythm of change. Over time, the mind learns to remain steady, not because emotions disappear, but because their impermanence is deeply known. In daily life, equanimity can be practiced by pausing before reacting, by remembering that all beings act under conditions, and by softening expectations of permanence in a world of change. Upekkha also teaches humility. It reveals that our perspective is one among countless others. The storm we feel so intensely is part of a larger weather system of life, not the whole sky. Hidden pain often grows from self-centeredness, the belief that our emotions define reality. Equanimity shifts this view, showing that while our emotions matter, they are part of a much wider unfolding. This humility brings spaciousness to the heart, making it less burdened by its own storms. There is also profound freedom in equanimity. To no longer be enslaved by every rise and fall of emotion is to taste liberation. It does not mean emotions vanish, it means they no longer rule. Anger arises, but it does not dictate. Fear arises, but it does not control. Joy arises, but it does not bind. Equanimity allows emotions to be guests rather than masters. In that shift, hidden pain loses its sharpest edge, and peace becomes possible even in the midst of life's turmoil. The forgotten nature of this practice in modern times makes its rediscovery urgent. A world of constant stimulation, judgment, and reactivity leaves hearts exhausted. Without balance, hidden pain grows silently under the weight of endless emotional turbulence. Upekkha offers the antidote not by silencing emotions, but by teaching the heart to stand steady amidst them. It is a practice of profound compassion for oneself, because it ends the cycle of being pulled endlessly between extremes. Equanimity does not mean life becomes bland or flat. In fact, it allows deeper engagement. Without fear of being overwhelmed, one can open more fully to joy, sorrow, love, and loss. Equanimity does not diminish life. It enriches it by making the heart spacious enough to hold all of it. This spaciousness is the soil where hidden pain dissolves, because nothing is clung to, nothing is rejected. Everything is seen, felt, and released in balance. To live with equanimity is to live with a steady flame that does not flicker with every wind. It is to walk through emotional storms with dignity, to care deeply without collapsing, to act wisely without being consumed. Hidden pain, which thrives on imbalance, cannot survive in this field of balance. Upekkha is not just peace, it is the kind of peace that arises when nothing can shake the center of the heart. And in that unshakable center, liberation is found. Equanimity shows us how balance steadies the heart in the middle of life's storms. Yet, even with balance, pain still arrives. The body aches, loss strikes, disappointment unfolds, and grief touches every life. These are part of existence and cannot be avoided. But the Buddha revealed something striking. Much of what we suffer is not from the pain itself, but from what the mind adds afterward, This teaching is known as the parable of the two arrows, and it exposes the hidden wound most people never notice. The first arrow is life itself. It is the sharp reality of being human. Aging, illness, injury, rejection, death. These are wounds that strike all beings. No one escapes them, not even the awakened ones. The second arrow is different. It is the arrow of the mind, the stories, judgments, fears, and resistance that follow the first wound. The first arrow pierces the body or the heart, but the second arrow pierces the mind. And often, this second wound causes far more suffering than the first. When grief arrives, the first arrow is the raw ache of loss. The second arrow is the thought, "This should not have happened. I cannot survive this. Life is unfair." When insult arrives, the first arrow is the sting of harsh words. The second arrow is the thought, "I am worthless. They always treat me this way. I will never be respected." When sickness comes, the first arrow is the pain of the body. The second arrow is the thought, "Why me? My life is ruined. I will never be whole again." These mental arrows are optional, yet most people fire them without realizing it. Hidden pain thrives on the second arrow. It festers in the stories we repeat, the judgments we carry, the comparisons we feed. While the first arrow eventually passes, the second arrow can be kept alive for years. A betrayal in childhood may remain as a first arrow for a moment, but the second arrow of, "I can never trust anyone," can dominate an entire lifetime. In this way, we become the ones who wound ourselves most deeply. The teaching of the two arrows is not meant to dismiss real pain. The Buddha did not deny the reality of physical or emotional wounds. Rather, he showed compassion by pointing out where we add to that pain unnecessarily. To end the second arrow is to stop multiplying suffering. It is to allow the first arrow to be what it is: real, human, unavoidable, without adding layers of self-punishment. The practice begins with recognition. When pain arises, ask, "What is the first arrow here, and what am I adding?" This simple inquiry reveals how quickly the mind fires the second arrow. A single disappointment can spiral into hours of rumination. A moment of embarrassment can grow into weeks of shame. Each time the mind repeats these thoughts, the wound deepens. But to recognize them as second arrows is to loosen their power. Awareness itself begins the healing. Ending the second arrow requires mindfulness, the ability to pause before reacting. When the first arrow strikes, the natural tendency is to flinch and then to react. But mindfulness introduces space. In that space, the pain is seen clearly without being amplified. For example, physical pain in meditation may be sharp, but when observed without judgment, it is simply sensation. Without the second arrow of, "I cannot bear this," the pain becomes manageable. This shift transforms the relationship to suffering. Compassion also plays a role. Many people fire second arrows at themselves through harsh self-criticism. A mistake becomes not just an event, but a declaration of unworthiness. Compassion interrupts this cycle. Instead of, "I am worthless," the voice of compassion says, "This is painful, but I am human. All beings make mistakes." Compassion disarms the second arrow, replacing it with gentleness. Over time, this practice rewires the mind to respond with kindness rather than cruelty. The second arrow also reveals how much of suffering is rooted in resistance. The mind says, "This should not be happening." That resistance tightens around the first wound, making it sharper. Acceptance does not mean liking the pain, but allowing it to be as it is. Acceptance removes the second arrow. The body may still ache, the loss may still be real, but without resistance, the suffering is lighter. The teaching also applies to relationships. Much conflict comes not from the first arrow of disagreement, but from the second arrow of added stories. A simple difference of opinion becomes, "They never respect me." A delayed reply becomes, "They do not care." The relationship is wounded not by the event but by the interpretation. To see this clearly is to protect love from unnecessary harm. It allows us to respond to what actually happened rather than to the story we added. In society too, second arrows multiply suffering. Injustice strikes as a first arrow, and the collective adds despair, division, and hatred as second arrows. While action is needed to address real harm, multiplying hatred only deepens wounds. Equanimity and compassion help communities face the first arrow without firing countless more. This creates space for wise response instead of endless reactivity. The two arrows also explain why some people seem resilient while others collapse under similar circumstances. The resilient feel the first arrow but do not fire the second. They allow pain but do not add layers of story. Those who collapse often suffer more from the arrows they fire themselves than from the original wound. Resilience, then, is not about avoiding pain, but about refusing to multiply it. Meditation offers a direct way to practice this teaching. In mindfulness of body, sensations of discomfort arise. Instead of adding stories, the meditator notes them as heat, pressure, or ache. The pain is felt but not personalized. This simple practice trains the mind not to add the second arrow. In mindfulness of mind, thoughts are seen as passing phenomena, not truths. A thought of fear is labeled fear, then released. The arrow is recognized but not driven deeper. Over time, this skill extends to daily life, where arrows can be stopped before they wound further. The two arrows teaching also reshapes how we hold memory. Many suffer not because of the past itself, but because of the second arrows. They continue to fire whenever the memory arises. The past cannot be undone, but the arrows fired in the present can be stopped. Each time we remember without adding judgment, the power of the past weakens. The wound remains, but the suffering lessens. This is the essence of healing through awareness. The difference between pain and suffering becomes clear here. Pain is the first arrow, real, physical, emotional. Suffering is the second arrow, the mental addition. To understand this difference is to take responsibility for the part we can change. We cannot stop all pain, but we can stop the unnecessary arrows we shoot into ourselves. This understanding is deeply empowering because it shows that freedom is possible even in the presence of pain. Over time, the practice of ending the second arrow creates a profound shift in daily life. Small frustrations no longer spiral into long hours of anger. Setbacks no longer become permanent identities. Even deep losses become lighter when not multiplied by endless stories. This does not make one cold or indifferent. On the contrary, it makes the heart more compassionate, because when we stop adding to our own suffering, we have more space to meet the suffering of others. The Buddha's teaching of the two arrows is simple, but its depth is vast. It reveals the hidden wound of the mind and offers the key to release. To live this teaching is to accept the first arrow with courage and to refuse the second arrow with wisdom. In this balance, hidden pain dissolves and peace arises not from avoiding life, but from meeting it with clarity. The first arrow may be unavoidable, but the second arrow is always a choice. And in choosing not to fire it, we find freedom in the very heart of suffering. The teaching of the two arrows reveals how much of our suffering is created by the mind itself, piling story upon story until the original pain is nearly forgotten beneath layers of self-inflicted wounds. But even deeper than this lies another truth. There are forces within us that actively seek to maintain suffering, voices that whisper convincingly, doubts that appear as reason, cravings that feel like freedom yet bind us tighter. In Buddhist language, these forces are called Mara. They are not demons outside waiting to attack, but patterns inside that sabotage peace while disguising themselves as our own thoughts and desires. Mara is subtle. Rarely does it appear as an obvious enemy. More often it hides in familiar voices. You'll never be enough. You can rest after you prove yourself. Indulge now, you'll deal with the consequences later. These thoughts sound logical, even practical, but their effect is the same. They keep us chained to cycles of dissatisfaction. Hidden pain thrives here because the sabotage feels like our own decision, our own will. Yet beneath the surface, it is simply old conditioning, an inner current that seeks to pull us away from freedom. One form Mara takes is doubt. Doubt whispers that the path of healing is pointless, that meditation is a waste of time, that peace is for others but not for you. This doubt is powerful because it pretends to be intelligence. It sounds like careful questioning, but its real aim is paralysis. Doubt freezes progress by convincing the heart not to try. Recognizing this voice as Mara is liberating. Doubt may still arise, but instead of bowing to it, we can see it for what it is, a passing trick, not the truth. Another form of Mara is desire, not in the sense of simple needs, but craving that promises satisfaction while delivering restlessness. The desire for recognition, the hunger for possessions, the endless chase for stimulation, these are forms of Mara disguised as fulfillment. They whisper, once you achieve this, once you gain that, then you will be at peace. Yet each time the goal is reached, dissatisfaction soon returns. Hidden pain deepens because the chase never ends. The cycle is endless until the craving itself is seen as the trap. Mara also appears as aversion. This is the voice that resists discomfort, that lashes out in anger, that avoids what feels unpleasant. It says, you should not have to feel this, escape it, push it away. On the surface, this seems protective, but in truth it multiplies suffering. Avoidance makes fear grow stronger. Anger poisons the heart long after the moment has passed. Aversion feeds hidden pain by teaching us to run from what must simply be faced. Recognizing this as Mara breaks its spell, when we stop fleeing, the pain itself begins to soften. A subtler form of Mara is pride. This voice inflates the self, convincing us we are superior, or at least that we must always appear strong. Pride can sound empowering, but it secretly isolates us. It refuses vulnerability, which is essential for true healing. Pride rejects connection, keeping wounds hidden. This too is sabotage, because while pride may protect the ego, it starves the heart of intimacy and support. The pain remains locked inside. Seeing pride as Mara allows us to open, to admit need, to accept help without shame. Mara is not only internal, it works through culture and society as well. Advertisements that tell us we are incomplete without buying more. Systems that reward exploitation over compassion, norms that equate worth with productivity, these are also forms of Mara. They disguise harm as success, encouraging us to sabotage our well-being in the name of achievement. Hidden pain grows when we measure our lives by these false standards. Recognizing this influence allows us to step back and choose a different measure, one rooted in peace rather than endless striving. The Buddha himself encountered Mara under the Bodhi tree as he sat on the brink of awakening. Mara sent visions of temptation, fear, and doubt, each designed to break his resolve. But the Buddha did not fight or flee. He simply saw Mara clearly, recognized the illusions, and remained unmoved. Finally, he touched the earth as witness to his awakening, and Mara's power dissolved. This story is a mirror for our own practice. Mara will appear in thought and feeling, but the key is recognition. To see Mara as Mara is to strip it of power. Hidden pain persists when Mara remains unseen. Doubt convinces us healing is impossible. Craving convinces us peace lies elsewhere. Aversion convinces us to flee from discomfort. Pride convinces us to hide. But when each of these is named, when each is seen as a trick of Mara, the grip loosens. Recognition itself is the antidote. The thought may still arise, but it no longer commands obedience. In daily life, practice means pausing when strong thoughts or urges appear. Instead of following immediately, ask, is this nourishment or is this Mara? That simple question can reveal much. A craving for endless scrolling, a sudden wave of despair, a harsh judgment of self. These can be recognized not as truth but as subtle sabotage. The pause gives space to choose differently. This is how Mara is defeated, not by force but by clarity. Mara also thrives in the shadows of shame. The thought that I am broken beyond repair is one of its most poisonous arrows. This voice convinces people to keep silent, to never seek help, to carry hidden pain as though it were their identity. But to expose shame to the light of awareness is to reveal Mara's trick. The Buddha taught that all beings carry seeds of awakening, that no one is beyond healing. Shame is Mara's illusion. Truth is that the heart is never too damaged to be free. Sometimes, Mara takes the form of restlessness. It drives us to constant activity, convincing us that stillness is dangerous or useless. But in avoiding stillness, we avoid the very space where healing unfolds. This is why meditation feels difficult for many. The restlessness is Mara, trying to keep us from meeting ourselves. Recognizing this can transform practice. Instead of seeing restlessness as failure, we can see it as the very moment Mara appears, giving us the chance to see through it. There is also the Mara of despair. This is the voice that says, there is no point, nothing will ever change. Despair convinces us to give up, to abandon effort. Yet despair is not truth, it is a passing state, a cloud in the mind. To recognize despair as Mara is to prevent it from defining the whole sky. The sun of awareness remains behind the cloud, and with patience, the cloud passes. In working with Mara, it is important to remember that it is not an enemy to be hated. To hate Mara is to fall into another trap, to create a version where understanding is needed. The Buddha did not destroy Mara. He acknowledged it with calm recognition. Likewise, we heal not by waging war on ourselves, but by seeing clearly. Each time we recognize sabotage as illusion, we strengthen wisdom and weaken hidden pain. The Dharma of Mara is therefore about honesty. It asks us to look at the ways we sabotage ourselves and to name them without fear. It shows us that what feels like our own thoughts are often echoes of conditioning, old habits wearing new masks. By shining light on these patterns, we take back freedom. The hidden demons lose their power when we see them clearly. To live with this awareness is to live with vigilance but also compassion. Mara will appear again and again, but each time is an opportunity. Each recognition weakens the chains of illusion. Each act of clarity heals another layer of hidden pain. Over time, this practice builds a life where self-sabotage no longer rules, where peace is no longer stolen by disguised desires and fears. The Dharma of Mara teaches that the greatest battles are not fought outside, but within. The hidden forces that hold us back are subtle, persuasive, and deeply familiar, but they are not ultimate truths. They are passing illusions, tricks of the mind. To see them is to be free from them, and in that freedom, hidden pain dissolves, leaving space for peace, strength, and clarity to shine. Recognizing Mara unmasks the ways we sabotage our own freedom, but even when we see through his tricks, another question quietly lingers. What does it mean to truly live with ease? Even when inner demons no longer dominate, many still feel poor inside, lacking, restless, haunted by the thought that something more is always needed. This subtle hunger is its own form of suffering, a constant thirst that no achievement or possession can satisfy. The Buddha addressed this restlessness with a teaching that is rarely emphasized but deeply liberating: noble wealth. Not wealth in coins or property, but the abundance of contentment, the richness that comes when one no longer measures life by what is missing. Contentment is not resignation. It is not the dull acceptance of mediocrity or the refusal to grow. It is the recognition that sufficiency already exists here and now. When the heart rests in contentment, it does not mean life is without effort, but that effort arises from peace rather than desperation. Hidden pain rooted in scarcity, thinking the endless fear of not having enough, not being enough, dissolves in the presence of this noble wealth. The Buddha pointed out that craving creates poverty, no matter how much one owns. A wealthy person consumed by desire lives like a beggar, always needing more. A simple person who feels content may have little, yet lives like a king. This reversal challenges modern assumptions about success. The constant chase for more possessions, more status, more security feeds hidden suffering because the mind never rests. Noble wealth shifts the perspective. Abundance is not measured by accumulation but by sufficiency of heart. The roots of scarcity thinking go deep. They are reinforced by society, which teaches that worth is tied to productivity, achievement, and comparison. Advertising thrives on reminding people of what they lack. Families pass down fears of insecurity, telling children to always grasp for more. This conditioning becomes a background hum of dissatisfaction, so constant that many mistake it for normal life. Yet this is precisely where hidden pain lives, buried in the belief that peace lies just beyond the next gain. Noble wealth interrupts this cycle by teaching that sufficiency is possible now. When we stop feeding the hunger for what is absent and begin to appreciate what is present, a profound shift occurs. The meal before us becomes a feast when eaten with gratitude. A roof overhead becomes a palace when seen with awareness. Relationships become treasures when valued for presence rather than judged for what they lack. Contentment transforms ordinary moments into abundance. This teaching does not deny the reality of poverty or need. The Buddha was clear that material conditions matter. Hunger and deprivation create real suffering. But noble wealth goes deeper, addressing the inner poverty that persists even when material needs are met. Hidden pain often thrives in those who have enough, yet still feel empty. Contentment heals this inner wound, not by ignoring needs, but by ending the endless thirst for more when enough has already been reached. Contentment also protects against the hidden suffering of envy. To look at another's success without restlessness is a sign of noble wealth. Without contentment, envy eats at the heart, convincing us that someone else's gain is our loss. This poison quietly corrodes joy. But with contentment, another's abundance can be celebrated, because sufficiency is already felt within. Envy loses its grip, and the heart becomes spacious enough to rejoice in the happiness of others. The practice of noble wealth requires mindfulness. It is easy to fall back into scarcity thinking, to look at life through the lens of what is missing. Mindfulness interrupts this habit by asking, what is already here? What is already enough? With each recognition, the grip of craving weakens. Over time, this practice rewires the mind from dissatisfaction to gratitude. Contentment grows not from external change, but from repeated recognition of sufficiency. One of the Buddha's metaphors for wealth was the ability to sleep with a calm heart. A person may have riches but lie awake in anxiety, guarding possessions, fearing loss. Another may have little but sleep soundly, free from worry. Who is truly wealthy? Hidden pain reveals itself in the restless nights of those who appear prosperous but are consumed by fear. Noble wealth, rooted in contentment, offers the deeper abundance of inner peace. Contentment also frees us from the burden of comparison. In a culture driven by competition, worth is measured against others, looks, careers, possessions, influence. This constant measuring feeds hidden insecurity. Contentment steps out of the game altogether. It recognizes that each life has its own rhythm, its own sufficiency. With this recognition, comparison loses meaning. The hidden pain of never measuring up dissolves, replaced by peace in one's own path. Noble wealth is not passivity. It does not mean one stops working, creating, or striving. It means the energy of striving shifts. Instead of grasping from lack, action flows from fullness. A person content with themselves still pursues growth, but growth becomes an expression of joy rather than desperation. This subtle shift transforms the quality of effort. Work done from lack drains, work done from sufficiency uplifts. The teaching also carries ethical weight. Contentment protects against exploitation. Many forms of harm in the world arise from greed, the inability to feel that what one has is enough. Exploiting resources, manipulating others, creating systems of inequality. These are driven by inner poverty disguised as ambition. Noble wealth counters this by grounding ethics in sufficiency. When the heart feels abundant, there is no need to harm others to gain more. Compassion flows naturally from contentment. For personal practice, cultivating noble wealth can begin with small acts of appreciation, pausing to breathe and notice what is already present, reflecting on simple blessings: the body that breathes, the friend who listens, the sun that rises. These reflections shift the focus from lack to sufficiency. Over time, this shift builds resilience. Life's uncertainties still come, but they do not collapse the heart because sufficiency is carried within. Contentment also transforms relationships. Hidden pain often arises when expectations are endless, when partners or friends are seen through the lens of what they fail to provide. Contentment allows one to value what is present without constant demand for more. This does not mean tolerating harm or neglect, but it does mean appreciating the reality of another without chaining them to fantasies. In this way, noble wealth strengthens bonds by replacing demand with gratitude. Even in solitude, noble wealth is medicine. Many fear being alone because scarcity thinking tells them they lack what they need. But with contentment, solitude becomes abundance. Silence is no longer emptiness but fullness. Time alone is no longer deprivation but richness. Hidden pain of loneliness dissolves in the recognition that being alive itself is already enough. The Buddha's surprising teaching on wealth is not about poverty or riches, but about perception. True poverty is endless craving. True wealth is sufficiency of heart. To see this is to uncover a freedom untouched by circumstance. Whether in plenty or in scarcity, the content heart rests at ease. This is noble wealth, the abundance that cannot be stolen, cannot be lost, because it does not depend on what one has, but on how one sees. To live with this wealth is to dissolve hidden pain at its root. The restless hunger that drives so much suffering is replaced by peace in the present. The illusions of lack lose power, and in their place grows a deep, quiet joy, the joy of knowing that this moment, as it is already enough. Contentment reveals that true wealth is not measured in possessions, but in the heart's ability to rest with what is already enough. Yet even when sufficiency is recognized, there is another force that quietly unsettles peace, restlessness. The mind still pushes, still hurries, still demands that life unfold faster than it does. This subtle impatience may not seem like a major problem, yet it erodes joy and magnifies hidden pain. The Buddha called the antidote khanti, patience, not passive waiting, but a radical medicine that heals the restlessness constantly tugging at the heart. Patience is often misunderstood as weakness, as if it means simply enduring whatever comes without spirit. In truth, patience is strength. It is the ability to meet delay, difficulty, or discomfort without collapsing into anger or despair. Hidden pain grows when impatience rules, because impatience tells us we cannot bear what is happening now, that relief must come immediately. Each time we give in to this urge, the heart becomes more fragile, less able to hold life as it is. Patience, on the other hand, builds resilience. It teaches that we can bear more than we think, and in bearing it, we grow stronger. Impatience is often invisible because it hides in small moments. The irritation when traffic slows, the frustration when someone does not reply quickly, the unease when results take longer than expected. Each instance may seem minor, but together they form a constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction. This restlessness creates subtle suffering, a low hum of tension that prevents deep peace. Patience cuts through this hum by teaching the heart to rest in the present, even when the present does not conform to desire. The Buddha described patience as the highest form of asceticism. More than fasting or physical discipline, patience transforms the deepest roots of suffering. To be patient with others prevents anger from turning into hatred. To be patient with ourselves prevents shame from turning into despair. To be patient with life prevents disappointment from turning into hopelessness. In this way, patience is not just endurance, it is active healing, transforming moments that would otherwise deepen wounds into opportunities for growth. Restlessness often arises because the mind confuses urgency with importance. Everything feels pressing, every delay feels unbearable, but patience restores perspective. It reminds us that most things do not need to happen instantly, that time itself is part of the unfolding. Hidden pain is fueled by the illusion that life is running out, that we must grasp and hurry to secure happiness. Patience dissolves this illusion by showing that rushing does not create peace, it only magnifies stress. Peace arises when we allow life to move at its natural rhythm. Patience also brings clarity. When the mind is impatient, it reacts impulsively, making decisions clouded by urgency. These decisions often create more suffering than the delay itself. Patience provides space. In that space, wisdom can arise. A pause before speaking prevents harsh words. A pause before acting prevents regret. Each act of patience protects us from unnecessary wounds. Over time, patience becomes a form of self-compassion, a way of guarding the heart against harm born of haste. Another dimension of patience is how it reshapes our relationship with others. Impatience with people often takes the form of criticism, judgment, or frustration. We want them to change, to respond, to behave differently, but this impatience only deepens division. Patience opens another path. To be patient with others is to acknowledge that they too are shaped by conditions, that they too are works in progress. This recognition softens the heart, replacing judgment with compassion. Relationships strengthen when nurtured by patience, because patience communicates trust that change will come in its time, that the other is accepted even while imperfect. Hidden pain within often arises from impatience with ourselves. We demand that healing happen quickly, that flaws disappear instantly, that growth be smooth and swift. When progress is slow, frustration turns inward, breeding shame and self-rejection. Patience with oneself is the medicine here. It acknowledges that growth is not linear, that wounds take time to heal, that setbacks are part of the path. With patience, the heart learns to hold itself gently, allowing transformation to unfold naturally. This self-patience is one of the most radical acts of kindness because it dismantles the hidden pain of self-condemnation. Patience also transforms how we meet suffering itself. Pain often feels intolerable because the mind insists it must end immediately. This resistance is what magnifies suffering. Patience shifts the stance. Instead of demanding the end of pain, it allows us to rest with it, even for a moment longer. This resting changes everything. Pain is still there, but it no longer rules us. Each moment of patience with pain reveals that we are larger than the discomfort, that the heart has space vast enough to contain it. In meditation practice, patience is essential. The mind wanders, the body fidgets, restlessness arises. Without patience, frustration grows, and the practice collapses. With patience, each distraction is simply noticed. Each moment begins again. Over time, this patience builds stability. The meditator learns that awareness does not need to fight restlessness, it only needs to wait. In waiting, the storm settles on its own. This lesson in meditation extends to life, where patience reveals that many storms calm not through force, but through time. Patience also has a protective quality. Life often brings insult, injustice, or provocation. Without patience, anger erupts, leading to words or actions that create further harm. Patience shields us from this harm. It allows us to meet provocation without adding fuel to the fire. This is not passivity, it is power. To hold steady when provoked is a strength far greater than reacting. Hidden pain caused by conflict often stems not from the original insult, but from our own impatient reaction. Patience prevents this chain, preserving peace even in difficulty. Culturally, impatience is often glorified. Speed, productivity, instant results are praised, while patience is seen as weakness. This cultural conditioning feeds hidden suffering, because it creates lives of constant urgency and dissatisfaction. The Dharma counters with a different vision: patience as nobility, as a treasure greater than gold. A society built on patience would value depth over speed, compassion over efficiency, peace over endless striving. On an individual level, reclaiming patience is a way of reclaiming freedom from a culture that feeds restlessness. Patience also reveals the wisdom of timing. Not all seeds sprout instantly. Some require seasons of waiting, conditions of soil and weather. Human growth is the same. To demand instant flowering is to destroy the seed. Patience trusts the natural rhythm of becoming. This trust dissolves hidden pain, born from forcing life to match our timetable. Instead of despair when results do not come quickly, patience teaches faith that what is nurtured with care will ripen in its season. The Buddha praised patience as one of the highest virtues because it transforms not only suffering, but the very foundation of how we meet existence. With patience, even difficulty becomes teacher. Delay becomes practice, waiting becomes meditation. Every moment is included, none wasted. Hidden pain shrinks in this field because it cannot feed on urgency. Without the demand for now, the heart finds rest in enough. The medicine of patience is radical because it works quietly, without drama. It does not erase challenges, but it changes how we carry them. It makes space where there was constriction. It brings gentleness where there was strain. It gives endurance where there was collapse. Over time, patience turns restlessness into peace, dissatisfaction into resilience, hidden pain into hidden strength. To live with patience is to walk with dignity through delay, to breathe calmly through storms, to trust the unfolding of time. It is to stop wounding ourselves with restless urgency and instead heal through steadiness. Patience is not waiting for peace, it is peace. expressed in the heart's willingness to rest where it stands. And in this resting, the subtle restlessness that fuels hidden suffering dissolves, leaving the spacious freedom of a life at ease. Patience shows us how restlessness can dissolve when the heart learns to wait with steadiness. Yet even this profound medicine points toward something deeper. Why does restlessness arise at all? Why does craving keep returning even after peace has been tasted? Why do wounds resurface even when healing has begun? To answer these questions, the Buddha turned to one of his most radical insights: dependent origination. This teaching reveals that suffering is not random, nor is it caused by a single event. It is a chain of conditions, each link feeding the next. To truly heal, we must understand the root causes instead of endlessly trimming the branches. Dependent origination begins with ignorance, the failure to see things as they are. This blindness is not stupidity, but a lack of clarity about impermanence, non-self, and the nature of suffering. From this lack of clarity, distorted views form, shaping every thought and action. When ignorance operates, the rest of the chain follows, unfolding like dominoes. Awareness of this starting point is crucial because it shows that suffering does not appear from nowhere. It sprouts from unseen soil. From ignorance arises formations, habitual tendencies shaped by past actions. These are the patterns that drive behavior even when we think we are choosing freely. For example, the habit of reacting with anger, the compulsion to seek validation, the urge to run from discomfort. These formations are like grooves in the mind, deepened by repetition. Hidden pain grows here because these grooves keep leading us into the same cycles. Recognizing their conditioned nature is the first step toward freedom. Formations give rise to consciousness, the stream of awareness that carries impressions forward. Consciousness here is not neutral, it is tinted by the formations that shape it. A mind conditioned by fear sees the world through suspicion. A mind conditioned by craving sees everything as potential gain. Consciousness becomes the lens through which the world is perceived, and this lens shapes reality itself. To see this is to realize how deeply conditioning feeds suffering. From consciousness arises name and form, the mental and physical aspects of existence. Together, they create the sense of self moving through the world. The body feels, the mind interprets, and the illusion of a solid identity strengthens. This identity becomes the stage where suffering plays out. Hidden pain arises here when we cling to body and mind as permanent, forgetting their fragile and interdependent nature. Awareness of name and form shows us that even the sense of I is part of the chain, not an independent truth. With name and form comes the 6 sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These are the doors through which the world enters. Each impression, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think, creates contact, the next link in the chain. Contact is the spark. The moment experience touches awareness. Hidden pain is born here when contact is immediately grasped or resisted. A harsh word contacts the ear, and before reflection, pain arises. A pleasant sight contacts the eye, and craving begins. Without mindfulness, contact becomes the ignition point of suffering. Contact gives rise to feeling pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is the raw tone of experience. At this stage, suffering is not yet inevitable. Feelings are natural, part of being alive. But when feelings are mistaken for permanent truths, the chain continues. Pleasant feelings lead to craving, unpleasant feelings to aversion, neutral feelings to boredom. Hidden pain thrives because we mistake these shifting tones for reality itself, chasing or rejecting them endlessly. From feeling arises craving. This is the thirst, the grasping that insists, I need more of this, or I must escape this. Craving is one of the central engines of suffering, and it often hides beneath seemingly reasonable desires. Wanting success, wanting comfort, wanting control, these seem harmless, yet when driven by craving, they feed dissatisfaction. Craving convinces us that peace lies in the next moment, the next gain, the next escape, but peace is endlessly postponed, and hidden pain deepens. Craving leads to clinging, a tighter form of grasping where identity becomes entangled. We cling to possessions, to beliefs, to roles, to people, as if they could provide security. Hidden pain grows here because clinging resists impermanence. When what we cling to inevitably changes, the heart breaks. The loss of a relationship, the fading of health, the collapse of a dream all become devastating when clung to as permanent. Clinging transforms natural change into sharp suffering, clinging conditions becoming the momentum of actions shaped by craving. This is the restless drive that propels life forward, creating new circumstances, reinforcing old habits, generating more suffering. Becoming is not peace, it is endless movement, fueled by dissatisfaction. Hidden pain thrives here because becoming never ends. Each attainment leads to the next desire, each escape leads to the next fear. The cycle continues, pulling consciousness forward into new states of dissatisfaction. From becoming arises birth, not only physical birth, but the constant birth of identity in every moment. Each time we cling, a new self is born. The self of anger, the self of craving, the self of fear. These births feel real, yet they are fragile, disappearing as quickly as they arise. Hidden pain arises because we mistake these temporary selves as permanent truths. The cycle of birth continues endlessly, fueled by craving and clinging. With birth comes aging and death, the natural consequence of arising phenomena. Every identity, every formation, every experience must fade. The hidden suffering here is not in death itself, but in resisting it, in pretending permanence exists where it never does. Aging, decay, and loss are natural, but when met with denial, they become unbearable. This is the final link of dependent origination, the culmination of all the conditions that began with ignorance. The brilliance of this teaching is that it reveals suffering as conditioned, not inevitable. Each link depends on the one before it. Break the chain at any point, and the cycle weakens. See through ignorance, and wisdom prevents the rest from unfolding. Meet feelings with mindfulness instead of craving, and clinging does not arise. Rest with impermanence, and birth of new identities slows. Dependent origination is not a philosophy of despair, it is a map of freedom, showing precisely where intervention is possible. For healing, this teaching matters because hidden pain often feels mysterious, as if it appears without cause. But dependent origination shows us that every wound is fed by conditions. When we examine carefully, we find the roots: ignorance, feeding craving, craving feeding, clinging, clinging, feeding restlessness. By addressing the roots rather than the surface, healing becomes lasting. Just as treating a tree requires caring for roots rather than trimming leaves, treating suffering requires insight into its conditions. This teaching also nurtures compassion. When we see that others act from conditions, we stop blaming them as permanent selves. Their anger, greed, or confusion is not who they are, it is the result of ignorance and conditioning. This understanding softens judgment and opens the door to empathy. Hidden pain dissolves in relationships when we stop taking others' actions as absolute and instead see the chain of causes behind them. Practically, dependent origination can be observed in daily life. Notice a moment of irritation. Behind it lies contact, a feeling, a craving for comfort, a clinging to expectation. Trace the links, and the irritation is no longer mysterious. Each step becomes visible, and in that visibility lies freedom. The same applies to joy. Tracing the conditions that support peace shows us how to nurture them intentionally. Dependent origination is not only about ending pain, but also about cultivating the roots of happiness. Meditation deepens this insight. As mindfulness sharpens, one sees how feelings arise with contact, how craving follows feeling, how clinging strengthens craving. This clear seeing is transformative. Each time the chain is observed, the possibility of stopping it grows. Hidden pain begins to fade, not because life changes, but because the cycle is no longer blindly followed. The teaching also dismantles fatalism. Some believe suffering is fate, unchangeable. Dependent origination shows otherwise. If suffering is conditioned, then freedom is possible by changing conditions. No matter how long one has been caught in cycles, the possibility of breaking them remains. This is profound hope, the assurance that healing is always possible. Dependent origination reveals suffering at its root, and by doing so, offers the deepest healing. Instead of trimming branches of restlessness or craving, it invites us to dig down and transform the soil itself. Hidden pain does not need to continue when its causes are seen clearly. Each moment of awareness interrupts the chain. Each act of mindfulness plants a new condition for peace. In this way, the Dharma shows that healing is not about escape, but about seeing deeply into the web of causes and choosing freedom where the cycle once seemed unbreakable. Seeing dependent origination shows us how suffering grows from a chain of causes. But even with this understanding, there remains a toxin that grips the heart tightly: hatred. Of all poisons, this one feels the most justified. When hurt by others, when betrayed or mistreated, the natural response is to armor the heart with anger. Yet this armor does not protect. It corrodes from within. Hatred binds us to the very pain we wish to escape, and its roots can last for decades if not transformed. The Buddha offered a medicine for this most difficult wound: metta, or loving kindness, extended even toward those we call enemies. The practice of metta toward enemies is not about approving of harm, nor does it deny injustice. It is about healing the poison that festers inside us long after the harm is done. When someone wounds us, the first arrow is their action, but hatred becomes the second arrow we drive into ourselves again and again. The heart rehearses anger, relives betrayal, replays the injustice until it becomes part of identity. Metta is the radical act of laying down that burden, choosing to meet the enemy not with more poison, but with a medicine that frees both sides from chains. This practice begins with recognition of what hatred costs. Anger feels powerful, but beneath the fire it leaves exhaustion. The mind consumed with revenge cannot rest. The body tightens, the breath shortens, sleep is disturbed. Hatred imprisons us in the past, forcing us to carry the offender within us day after day. Metta reveals another path, not forgiveness in the conventional sense, but the offering of goodwill that cuts through our own suffering. When we send kindness toward an enemy, it is not for them first, but for ourselves. It is to reclaim the heart from the grip of poison. The Buddha compared hatred to holding a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at another. The one who holds it is the one burned. Metta practice is dropping the coal. This dropping does not excuse the wrong, but prevents us from being destroyed by it. Hidden pain thrives when we refuse to release the coal, convincing ourselves that our suffering punishes the one who harmed us. Yet often, they move on while we remain chained. Metta ends this silent self-punishment. The method is simple in structure but profound in effect. We begin by cultivating metta toward ourselves. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be at peace. This lays the ground of goodwill. Then we extend it to friends, to neutral people, and finally, to those who have caused us pain. The phrases may feel false at first, especially when directed toward an enemy. Resistance rises. The mind argues, they do not deserve kindness. But here lies the medicine. The practice is not about what they deserve, it is about freeing ourselves from carrying them in bitterness. Hidden pain rooted in hatred often survives because we confuse anger with justice. We believe that letting go of hatred means letting go of fairness. But metta does not erase accountability. One can still seek justice, set boundaries, or remove oneself from harmful situations. What metta does is prevent the heart from drowning in resentment while doing so. Justice without hatred is clear and effective. Justice with hatred is clouded and often destructive. Metta makes justice clean. This practice also reveals something unexpected. Enemies, too, are caught in dependent origination. Their harmful actions arise from ignorance, craving, clinging, and conditions we may never see. To meet this truth with hatred is to deepen cycles of suffering. To meet it with metta is to step outside the cycle. This does not mean excusing cruelty, but understanding that their actions come from their own chains. With this understanding, the heart can release hatred while still recognizing the harm. Metta toward enemies also heals collective wounds. Entire communities carry generations of anger, each side rehearsing grievances, each feeding the fire of division. Hidden pain becomes cultural, passed like inheritance. When even a few individuals practice metta, a new current enters the collective field. It may not erase conflict instantly, but it plants seeds of peace that ripple outward. The history of reconciliation movements shows this truth. Where hatred could have fueled endless cycles, compassion opened a new path. For personal healing, metta is especially powerful when resentment is buried. Often we convince ourselves that anger has faded, yet subtle hostility remains tightness when we hear a name, unease when we recall a memory, bitterness that colors perception. These quiet forms of hatred feed hidden pain silently. Metta practice brings them into the light. By consciously directing goodwill, even reluctantly, we expose these shadows. At first, it may feel mechanical, but over time, sincerity grows. The heart begins to soften, and the hidden wound starts to close. This practice also expands compassion for ourselves. Hatred often masks deeper feelings: hurt, fear, humiliation. By sending metta to an enemy, we acknowledge those wounds indirectly. We admit, I have been hurt, but I will not remain bound by that hurt. In doing so, self-compassion and resilience deepen. We see that healing does not require the enemy's apology, because healing is not dependent on them. It arises from our own practice of freeing the heart. In daily life, moments to practice metta toward enemies appear often. A rude driver, a critical co-worker, a neglectful partner. These may not be lifelong enemies, but they awaken the same patterns of anger. To send goodwill, even in these small cases, builds the capacity for larger challenges. Over time, the heart becomes less reactive, less poisoned by every slight. Instead of carrying bitterness, we learn to release it swiftly, preserving peace. Meditation strengthens this capacity. In silence, we bring the image of the enemy to mind and repeat phrases of goodwill. Resistance is expected. The practice is not easy. Yet each repetition plants a seed. Over days, months, years, the soil of the heart changes. The enemy may never change, but our relationship to them does. The poison of hatred weakens, and in its place grows a quiet strength, freedom from being defined by the harm done to us. Metta toward enemies is one of the most radical practices because it challenges the deepest instincts of self-protection. Yet its fruits are profound. It dissolves hidden pain rooted in resentment. It reclaims energy wasted on bitterness, and it creates space for genuine peace. The enemy may still exist, injustice may still require action, but the heart no longer carries poison while addressing it. This is liberation not in theory but in lived experience. The Buddha declared that hatred never ceases by hatred, but only by love. Metta toward enemies is the living proof of this truth. It is the practice of healing the poison of hatred with the medicine of kindness, a medicine that begins in our own hearts and radiates outward. And when this practice takes root, hidden pain that once felt permanent begins to dissolve, replaced by a strength that no enemy can steal, the strength of a heart that refuses to be chained by hatred. Extending metta toward enemies reveals that even hatred, one of the most corrosive poisons, can be transformed into freedom. Yet this raises another question. Why do such poisons keep arising in the first place? Why do anger, greed, envy, fear, and despair circle back into our lives again and again, no matter how much we practice? The Buddha described these recurring patterns not as accidents but as realms, 6 states of existence that are both mythic and deeply psychological. These realms are not places we travel after death alone. They are conditions of mind that we move through daily, often without recognizing them. To understand the 6 realms is to hold a map of hidden suffering, one that shows exactly where the mind wanders when peace is lost. The realm of gods, or devas, is marked by pleasure and abundance. On the surface, it seems like bliss, but its hidden pain is complacency. Those in this state forget impermanence, assuming comfort will last forever. When loss eventually arrives, the fall is devastating. Psychologically, this realm appears in moments of privilege and ease, when we drown in pleasures and forget the fragility of life. Hidden pain here comes from denial, the refusal to acknowledge that every comfort eventually fades. Awareness transforms this realm by remembering gratitude and impermanence within pleasure, softening the crash that otherwise follows. The realm of demigods, or asuras, is dominated by envy, comparison, and constant struggle. Here beings look upward at the gods with jealousy, forever competing and fighting to gain what others have. In human life, this realm manifests as endless rivalry, career competition, social comparison, the restless drive to always outdo. Hidden pain in this realm is subtle because it wears the mask of ambition. Yet beneath it lies exhaustion, insecurity, and the inability to rest. The practice here is contentment and sympathetic joy, rejoicing in the success of others rather than feeding the fire of envy. The human realm is considered precious because it holds both suffering and the possibility of awakening. Unlike gods lost in pleasure or animals trapped in instinct, humans experience enough dissatisfaction to seek freedom. Yet hidden pain here is distraction. With the potential for growth, many waste the chance in trivial pursuits. Days are lost to idle consumption, opportunities to awaken are neglected. The suffering of the human realm is restlessness, a scattered life that forgets its unique opportunity. The antidote is mindfulness, remembering that human birth is rare and fragile, a gift that should be used to cultivate wisdom and compassion. The animal realm is marked by ignorance and instinct. Here, survival dominates food, shelter, safety. In human psychology, this realm appears as inertia, dullness, and refusal to reflect. People in this state follow habits blindly, trapped in cycles of comfort-seeking without deeper awareness. Hidden pain here is stagnation, the quiet suffering of a life unexamined. Though it may seem safe, it leaves the heart unfulfilled. To rise from this realm requires curiosity, study, and the willingness to question routine. Mindfulness breaks the inertia and allows growth. The hungry ghost realm, or preta, is dominated by insatiable craving. Beings here wander with huge bellies and tiny throats, never satisfied no matter how much they consume. Psychologically, this realm manifests as addiction, whether to substances, validation, status, or distraction. Hidden pain here is endless hunger, the gnawing sense of lack that cannot be filled. Even when something is gained, it vanishes instantly into dissatisfaction. The practice here is generosity and gratitude, learning to open the heart rather than hoard. Only by turning outward, by giving, can the endless hunger be transformed. The hell realms are states of intense suffering, fueled by hatred, rage, and despair. In their fiery forms, they are dominated by aggression. In their cold forms, by isolation and numbness. Psychologically, this is depression, trauma, or uncontrollable fury. Hidden pain here is overwhelming, often convincing the person that no escape exists. The Dharma teaches otherwise. Even in hell, seeds of awakening remain. Patience, compassion, and mindfulness of impermanence can open cracks of light. The hell realms may feel permanent, but they too are conditions, subject to change. Recognizing this truth is the first step toward freedom. What makes the teaching of the six realms profound is that we move through them constantly. A morning of joy may feel like the God realm, an afternoon of jealousy like the Asura realm, an evening of numbness like the animal realm, a night of craving like the hungry ghost realm, and a moment of rage like the hell realm. These realms are not distant, they are present here, shaping our inner landscape. Hidden pain is multiplied because we mistake these temporary states for permanent realities. We say, "I am depressed," or "I am unworthy," as though the realm is our identity. In truth, it is a passing state. To see this is to loosen the grip of suffering. Awareness of the realms also builds compassion. When others act from anger, greed, or envy, we can see that they are caught in a realm not defined forever. This understanding prevents judgment. A person lashing out in rage is not simply cruel, they are experiencing the hell realm. A person chasing endlessly after status is not shallow, they are trapped in the Asura realm. Recognizing the realm allows us to respond with wisdom rather than condemnation, dissolving hidden pain in relationships. The six realms also reveal the importance of practice. Without mindfulness, we are pulled from realm to realm unconsciously, tossed like leaves in the wind. With practice, we begin to recognize where we are. Recognition itself weakens the power of the realm. When we notice craving rising, we can practice generosity. When envy arises, we can practice joy. When rage burns, we can practice patience. Each practice interrupts the cycle, loosening the chains of samsara. The human realm's unique gift is the ability to reflect. Animals, ghosts, gods, and hell beings are trapped by their conditions, but humans can question and transform. This is why the Buddha emphasized the preciousness of human birth. To waste it in distraction is to miss the chance for freedom. Hidden pain dissolves when we use this opportunity fully, when we practice, reflect, and awaken within the very cycles that cause suffering. The teaching of the six realms does not ask us to believe in myth, but to look honestly at our minds. Where do we dwell most often? Which realm feels most familiar? This reflection reveals the hidden pain we carry daily, but it also reveals the path forward. Each realm has an antidote, a practice that transforms its suffering into wisdom. By applying these antidotes, we slowly free ourselves from being bound to the cycles. Ultimately, the six realms are not prisons but mirrors. They reflect the states of consciousness that keep us circling in dissatisfaction. To recognize them is to step back from identification, to say, "This is a realm passing through me, not the essence of who I am." In that recognition, hidden pain begins to dissolve. The cycle of realms still moves, But with awareness, we are no longer trapped inside it. We become travelers with a map, able to walk through each realm without losing ourselves, until the day comes when the cycle itself no longer binds us at all. The 6 realms reveal how hidden suffering disguises itself as states of mind, shaping the way we see and respond to life. But even when we learn to recognize these realms and loosen their grip, there remains another subtle trap: our own certainty. The Buddha warned that clinging to views, even views about truth, morality, or spirituality, can wound the heart as deeply as craving or hatred. Rigid beliefs build cages, and inside those cages, suffering multiplies. To step out requires a rare quality: intellectual flexibility, the willingness to hold views lightly, to let them guide but not imprison. Clinging to views often begins innocently. We form conclusions about the world, about others, about ourselves, and those conclusions give us security. Yet over time they harden into identities. This is who I am. This is how things must be. This is the only right way. The problem is not the views themselves, but the rigidity with which they are held. Life is impermanent, conditions shift, and rigid beliefs cannot bend with change. The hidden pain is the tension between reality's fluidity and the mind's insistence on solidity. This clinging appears in many forms. On a personal level, it manifests as stories about the self: I am a failure, or I am always strong. These are not truths, but views shaped by memory and emotion. When clung to, they restrict growth. Someone who believes they are a failure avoids opportunities, reinforcing their suffering. Someone who believes they must always be strong hides vulnerability, cutting themselves off from healing. Non-clinging to views opens space for self-understanding that evolves, for identity that breathes rather than suffocates. On a relational level, clinging to views often destroys connection. When two people hold rigid positions, conflict intensifies. Each is more concerned with being right than with understanding. Hidden pain grows because the heart longs for connection, but the mind insists on division. Letting go of rigid views does not mean abandoning discernment. It means listening, being willing to see from another's perspective, being willing to soften. In that softening, the possibility of reconciliation appears. Even spiritual practice is not immune. The Buddha repeatedly warned against attachment to doctrines, even his own. A teaching is like a raft, useful to cross the river, but a burden if carried afterward. Yet many cling to spiritual systems as identities. My tradition is the only true one. My interpretation is correct, others are wrong. Such clinging transforms wisdom into weapon, creating pride, judgment, and exclusion. The hidden pain is subtle but real, a heart closed to learning, a practice reduced to defense. Non-clinging restores humility, reminding us that the Dharma points to truth but is not itself the truth. At its core, clinging to views is a form of fear. Certainty feels safe, while uncertainty feels threatening. To release rigid views requires courage, the courage to stand in the open without the shield of absolute answers. Yet paradoxically, this openness brings peace. Certainty may feel comforting, but it is brittle, always threatened by contradiction. Flexibility feels vulnerable at first, but it is resilient, able to adapt to life's shifts. Hidden pain fades because the heart no longer fears being wrong. It values being awake more than being certain. Non-clinging does not mean having no views at all. It means holding views provisionally, as tools rather than identities. A map is useful, but to mistake the map for the territory is to get lost. Likewise, a belief may guide us, but if clung to as absolute, it blinds us to reality. Intellectual flexibility is the willingness to update the map when the landscape changes. In this way, views serve liberation rather than hinder it. The practice begins with awareness of language. Words like always, never, must, only often signal clinging. Each time we notice them in thought or speech, we can pause and soften. Instead of, "This must be true," we try, "This seems true right now." This small shift transforms rigidity into openness. Over time, the heart becomes less defensive, less invested in being right, more willing to learn. Non-clinging also requires mindfulness of emotional charge. Often, when a view is challenged, anger or fear arises. This is a signal of attachment. Instead of defending immediately, practice pausing to feel the discomfort. Ask, "What am I protecting?" Usually it is not truth itself, but identity, the sense of self tied to being right. To recognize this is to loosen the grip. Truth does not need our defense. What needs defense is the ego, and seeing this clearly dissolves much hidden pain. This teaching also applies to social and political views. While discernment is necessary to address injustice, rigidity can create further division. When clinging hardens, opponents become enemies, dialogue collapses, and hatred grows. Non-clinging does not mean apathy. It means engaging with clarity and compassion, recognizing that even our deepest convictions may hold partial truth. In this way, action is strong, but not poisoned by self-righteousness. The hidden pain of division eases, replaced by a deeper solidarity with all beings. The Buddha's own example shows the power of non-clinging. When questioned, he often remained silent rather than defend metaphysical positions. He knew that clinging to views about the origin of the universe or the fate of the soul distracted from the real work of ending suffering. His silence was not ignorance but wisdom, the refusal to be trapped in debates that create more attachment. This model teaches us that freedom is not found in having the perfect view, but in letting go of the need for absolute certainty. Hidden suffering caused by clinging to views is everywhere. It appears in families divided by politics, in communities fractured by ideology, in inner lives shackled by old stories. Each time we release a rigid view, we create space for healing. The heart softens, the mind opens, and connection becomes possible. Non-clinging is not a loss but a gain, the gain of freedom, curiosity, and compassion. To practice non-clinging daily, one can cultivate the phrase, "I may be wrong." This is not weakness but strength. It opens dialogue, invites learning, and humbles the ego. Another practice is to seek out perspectives different from our own, not to defeat them but to understand. Each encounter becomes a chance to expand awareness rather than fortify walls. Over time, this flexibility becomes natural, a way of living that welcomes reality instead of fighting it. The Dharma of non-clinging to views shows that suffering is not only in craving or aversion, but also in the mind's hunger for certainty. To release this hunger is to free the heart from a subtle but powerful form of bondage. Intellectual flexibility heals by allowing us to meet life as it is, not as we insist it must be. Hidden pain dissolves when we no longer fight to defend every belief, but instead rest in openness, curiosity, and compassion. This is the freedom of a heart unchained by views, a freedom as radical as any awakening. Letting go of rigid views reveals a freedom that cannot be found in certainty, but clarity alone is not the end of the journey. Once the mind loosens its grip, the deeper question arises: how do we navigate the path of inner healing itself? Zen tradition offers a rare and poetic map known as the 10 ox-herding pictures. These images, drawn centuries ago, trace the stages of seeking, finding, taming, and ultimately transcending the restless mind. Though simple in form, they are profound mirrors of our emotional struggles and the steps by which hidden pain is transformed into freedom. The first picture is the search for the ox. This represents the initial recognition that something is missing, that the restless heart longs for peace. At this stage, hidden pain is sharp. The seeker feels lost, caught in cycles of craving and dissatisfaction, unsure where to turn. Yet the very restlessness becomes the catalyst. The ox, symbol of the true mind, is not gone. It is only obscured. The first healing arises from admitting the longing, from taking the first step on the path instead of numbing the hunger. The second picture shows the discovery of footprints. These are the signs of the path, glimpses of truth found through teachings, teachers, or sudden insights. Hidden pain softens here as hope awakens. The footprints show that the ox can be found, that peace is not an illusion. Yet the danger at this stage is clinging to signs rather than continuing the search. Many mistake glimpses for the whole, but true healing requires persistence. The footprints remind us that guidance exists, but the journey must be walked fully. The third picture depicts the first sight of the ox. A flash of recognition breaks through confusion, perhaps in meditation, perhaps in silence, perhaps in an unexpected moment of clarity. Hidden pain shifts, because for the first time, the seeker sees that beneath the noise of thought and emotion lies a deeper awareness. This glimpse is profound but fragile. The ox is partly hidden, difficult to grasp. Here the practice is to strengthen mindfulness, to keep returning to the moment of recognition rather than falling back into old illusions. The fourth picture shows the capture of the ox. The seeker grasps the rope of discipline and begins to restrain the mind's wild movements. This is a stage of struggle. Hidden pain becomes clear, for when one begins to tame the mind, suppressed emotions rise to the surface. Anger, fear, craving, and despair all emerge, as though resisting the rope. The healing here is gradual. Through patience, meditation, and ethical living, the ox begins to respond. Though difficult, this stage is essential, for it teaches resilience and courage in facing inner storms. The fifth picture reveals the ox being tamed. The struggle lessens as the mind begins to settle. The wild impulses no longer dominate. Hidden pain softens further as habits of craving weaken. At this stage, joy begins to appear naturally, not as a fleeting thrill but as quiet contentment. The ox, once resistant, now walks with the herder. The healing here is stability, the ability to remain calm in difficulty, to meet life without being constantly thrown off balance. The sixth picture shows riding the ox home. Here, peace becomes more natural. The seeker rests in mindfulness with ease. The heart grows spacious, and hidden pain feels lighter than ever before. Joy, gratitude, and simplicity define this stage. The ox carries the seeker effortlessly, showing that the mind once tamed becomes an ally rather than an enemy. Healing deepens because one no longer struggles with every emotion, but learns to ride them with balance and grace. The seventh picture depicts forgetting the ox. At this point, even the idea of discipline fades. The seeker no longer clings to practice as an effort. Mind and self merge into one flow. Hidden pain dissolves further because the sense of separation weakens. There is no longer me taming the mind. There is simply awareness, open and unforced. This stage marks the transition from effort to naturalness, from striving to being. Healing arises here through release, not through control. The eighth picture shows both ox and self-forgotten. This is the realm of emptiness, where even the subtle idea of practice drops away. Hidden pain, rooted in the illusion of self, dissolves almost completely. The heart is free, spacious, unattached. There is no ox to find, no seeker to struggle, only pure presence. This stage is often described as enlightenment, yet Zen warns against clinging even here. To think, "I am enlightened," is another trap. True healing is beyond labels. The ninth picture reveals returning to the origin. After emptiness, the seeker sees the ordinary world with new eyes. Mountains are again mountains, rivers are again rivers, yet they are no longer bound by illusion. Hidden pain has lost its foundation because the heart knows the true nature of things. Joy is found in the simplest acts: walking, eating, speaking. The healing here is integration, the wisdom of emptiness expressed in everyday life, free from pretense. The 10th picture shows entering the marketplace with open hands. The seeker, now healed, returns to the world not as a recluse but as a compassionate presence. The ox herder is depicted with a smile, mingling with others, bringing peace into ordinary interactions. This is the ultimate healing, transforming personal liberation into service. Hidden pain dissolves not only for oneself, but for others, as kindness and wisdom radiate outward. The cycle is complete, yet it continues endlessly, as each person touched by compassion begins their own search for the ox. The 10 ox herding pictures offer a profound map of healing because they honor the stages of struggle rather than skipping to the end. They show that hidden pain is not a mistake but part of the path. The longing of the search, the difficulty of taming, the joy of riding, the release of forgetting all are necessary. Each stage carries its own medicine, each prepares the heart for the next. For modern practice, these images can be reflected upon as mirrors of personal experience. One may recognize being in the stage of searching, restless and dissatisfied. Another may recognize glimpses of peace but difficulty holding them. Another may feel the struggle of taming old habits. Recognizing the stage is itself healing, for it shows that hidden pain is not permanent, it is part of a process that leads to freedom. The pictures also remind us that healing is not linear. We may glimpse the ox, then lose sight again. We may ride in peace, then return to struggle. This is not failure, but natural rhythm. The map teaches patience, reminding us that each return is part of the journey. Hidden pain lessens not through perfection, but through persistence. Ultimately, the 10 ox herding pictures teach that healing is not escape but integration. The journey begins with restless longing and ends with open-handed compassion. Along the way, every form of hidden suffering is met, transformed, and released. The ox, symbol of the true mind, is never truly lost. It has always been here. The practice is simply to see, to tame, to release, and finally to share. In this way, the rare Zen imagery becomes a timeless guide for anyone seeking to dissolve hidden pain and awaken to the freedom already within. The 10 ox herding pictures end with the image of returning to the world, carrying wisdom and compassion into ordinary life. This final step reveals that the journey of healing is not meant to be walked in isolation. Even the most profound insights lose depth if they remain hidden in solitude. The Dharma teaches that true companionship, known as kalyana mittata, is not just ordinary friendship but a form of medicine. It is the rare bond that arises when people come together not for distraction or convenience, but to support one another in awakening. Spiritual friendship is healing because it directly addresses loneliness, one of the deepest forms of hidden pain. A person may be surrounded by acquaintances and yet feel unseen, unheard, unknown. Ordinary friendships often orbit around entertainment or habit, but they may avoid the raw truths of suffering. Kalyana mittata is different. It is companionship that does not turn away from struggle, that dares to sit with silence, that encourages honesty even when honesty is difficult. In such bonds, wounds long carried in secret find the light of compassion. The Buddha emphasized this teaching with extraordinary clarity. When his disciple Ananda asked whether spiritual friendship was half of the holy life, the Buddha corrected him. It is the whole of the holy life. This statement reveals that awakening is not only a solitary path of meditation, but also a shared path of relationship. The presence of companions who remind us of truth, who call us back when we drift, who hold us steady when storms rise, this presence is as vital as the practice itself. Hidden pain often arises when the heart feels abandoned. Spiritual friendship dissolves this pain by reminding us, you do not walk alone. What makes such friendships rare is that they are rooted in the Dharma, not in convenience. A Kalyana Mitta is one who encourages ethical living, mindfulness, and compassion. They are not there simply to agree or flatter, but to reflect truth. Sometimes this means gentle correction. Sometimes it means encouragement when doubt overwhelms. Sometimes it simply means presence, a steady hand when words are unnecessary. Each act, however small, becomes medicine. The wound of isolation heals in the warmth of connection. Spiritual friendship is also reciprocal. It is not about leaning endlessly on another, but about walking together. Each person brings their own strength and their own vulnerability, and the exchange becomes nourishment. Hidden pain fades here because the ego's belief in self-sufficiency loosens. To accept support and to offer support are equally important. Both remind us of interdependence, the truth that healing is woven from shared threads rather than isolated effort. In practice, Kalyana Mitta can take many forms. It may appear as a teacher guiding a student with wisdom and patience. It may appear as fellow practitioners sitting together in silence, their shared discipline creating strength beyond what each could summon alone. It may appear as friends who remind each other of compassion when anger rises, who hold each other accountable to kindness in times of conflict. Each form serves the same purpose, to remind the heart of its capacity for peace. This kind of friendship heals in ways ordinary friendship cannot, because it touches the hidden wounds beneath the surface. Many carry shame, convinced they must hide their struggles to be accepted. In spiritual friendship, these shadows can be revealed without fear of rejection. When a friend listens without judgment, reflects without condemnation, and reminds us of our inherent dignity, shame begins to dissolve. The very act of being seen and accepted in truth is healing. Kalyana Mitta also protects against the subtle poisons of envy and competition. In ordinary relationships, comparison often corrodes connection. In spiritual friendship, another's growth is not a threat but a joy. Their progress becomes encouragement, their clarity becomes inspiration. The bond is strengthened rather than weakened by difference. Hidden pain fueled by comparison loses its power because the friendship itself is built on the shared intention of liberation, not on rivalry. Another dimension of this medicine is honesty. True companions tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. They remind us when we drift into harmful patterns, when we are blinded by anger, when we are caught in craving. Because their correction comes from love rather than judgment, it heals rather than wounds. Hidden pain thrives in self-deception. A Kalyana Mitta dissolves this by reflecting reality gently but firmly, helping us see what we cannot see alone. Spiritual friendship also cultivates resilience. When practice feels heavy, when doubt rises, when life delivers suffering that feels unbearable, a friend, rooted in Dharma, steadies us. Their encouragement reminds us of the path. Their presence keeps us from giving up. This resilience is not built by avoiding suffering but by facing it together. The knowledge that someone walks beside us transforms even the hardest journey into something possible. The power of Kalyana Mitta extends beyond individuals. Communities built on such friendships become fields of healing. Monastic sanghas, lay practice groups, or even small circles of friends who gather for meditation, these spaces create collective strength. Hidden pain that might overwhelm one person becomes lighter when carried by many. The community itself becomes medicine, a living reminder of interconnection. For those without such companionship, the teaching is not despair, but encouragement. Even one friend rooted in Dharma can change the entire course of practice. If such a friend is not yet present, the practice of becoming one is itself powerful. By offering support, by living truthfully, by cultivating compassion, one attracts and strengthens such bonds. Spiritual friendship begins with the willingness to embody it. This medicine is especially important in a world where isolation has become common. Many live surrounded by noise, yet starved of true connection. Hidden pain grows in this silence of the heart. Kalyana Mittata counters it by providing depth where superficiality dominates, presence where distraction prevails. It reminds us that companionship is not about quantity, but about quality, the depth of connection rooted in shared intention. The Buddha's insistence that spiritual friendship is the whole of the holy life carries profound meaning. Awakening is not only about transcending the self, but also about dissolving the illusion of separateness between beings. True companions are mirrors of this truth. They reflect our struggles, our strengths, and our inherent capacity for freedom. Through them, we see ourselves more clearly, and through us, they see themselves. In this mutual reflection, hidden wounds heal because they are no longer carried in isolation. Kalyana Mittata, then, is not merely friendship but a form of sacred medicine. It transforms isolation into belonging, shame into acceptance, envy into joy, despair into resilience. It is the field in which the heart blossoms fully, supported by others walking the same path. Hidden pain may not vanish overnight, but in the presence of such friendship, it cannot remain hidden. It is seen, held, and gradually released. To walk with true companions is to remember that the path of awakening is shared. Each step becomes lighter, each burden easier, each joy greater when carried together. And in this companionship, the heart discovers a wealth more precious than gold, the rare healing power of connection rooted in Dharma. The rare gift of Kalyana Mittata shows that true friendship rooted in Dharma can dissolve the hidden pain of isolation. Yet even with the support of spiritual companions, there remains another obstacle that quietly fuels suffering: the ego's constant demand to be defended. Anger, resentment, and offense often arise not because of what truly happens, but because the self feels threatened or disrespected. Zen offers a profound metaphor to address this, the teaching of the empty boat. It shows that much of our pain is born from mistaking accidents and conditions for personal attacks, from reacting as though everything is about us. The story is simple. A person is crossing a river when another boat drifts into theirs. If the other boat is empty, no anger arises. It is seen as mere circumstance. But if someone is sitting inside the boat, anger erupts. Why are you so careless? Why did you crash into me? The event is the same, yet the reaction differs. The empty boat becomes a mirror, showing that anger often depends not on the event but on the ego's interpretation. To treat all boats as empty is to remove the self from the center, to release the reflex of taking everything personally. Hidden pain thrives because the ego constantly interprets life through the lens of me and mine. A colleague's comment is heard as insult. A stranger's glance is taken as judgment. A loved one's distraction is read as rejection. In reality, most actions of others are driven by their own conditions, not by us. They act out of habit, stress, ignorance, or pain of their own. But when we make everything personal, we fire the second arrow into ourselves, creating unnecessary suffering. The empty boat teaching interrupts this cycle. It reminds us, people are moved by countless causes, and their actions are rarely about us. This perspective does not deny responsibility. If harm is caused, it should be addressed. But by seeing the boat as empty, we address the harm without adding the poison of ego-based anger. We can respond clearly, set boundaries, or seek justice without carrying resentment. This difference is vital for healing hidden wounds. Resentment lingers long after events pass, chaining us to pain. Letting the boat be empty frees us from that chain. Consider the daily frustrations of modern life. Someone cuts us off in traffic, speaks harshly in a meeting, or ignores our message. The ego leaps to defend. They disrespected me. Yet most often, the other person is lost in their own storm, unaware of our existence in that moment. To react with anger only multiplies pain. To treat it as an empty boat is to recognize that the event reflects their conditions, not our worth. This recognition diffuses anger and preserves peace. The practice of the empty boat also reveals the hidden cost of ego reactions. Each time we defend the self, the heart tightens. The body reacts with tension, stress hormones flood, and the mind replays the incident for hours or days. What could have been a brief inconvenience becomes long-lasting suffering. By shifting perspective, by refusing to take it personally, the burden dissolves. We reclaim energy that would have been wasted on resentment. This teaching does not mean becoming passive or ignoring harm. It means responding without ego. When someone speaks unkindly, we can acknowledge the impact without needing to label ourselves as victim or them as enemy. When someone acts unfairly, we can address it with clarity rather than revenge. This balance, firmness without anger, response without ego, is the heart of the empty boat. It allows justice and compassion to coexist, ending the cycle of hidden pain. The metaphor also applies inwardly. Many people carry anger toward themselves, reacting to past mistakes as though the self were a solid enemy. But those past actions too were the product of conditions, ignorance, fear, confusion. To see our own past self as an empty boat is to soften self-hatred. This does not excuse harm done, but it allows forgiveness by recognizing that we, too, were moved by forces larger than conscious control. Self-compassion grows when the ego loosens its grip on the narrative of blame. Meditation deepens this teaching. In mindfulness practice, thoughts and emotions drift into awareness like boats on a river. When we cling to them as mine, anger or shame arises. But when we see them as empty, simply conditions passing through consciousness, their hold weakens. We begin to experience life less as a personal drama and more as a flow of causes and effects. Hidden pain dissolves because the ego no longer insists on being the center of every event. Relationships also transform under this lens. Many conflicts in families and partnerships are fueled by ego reactions. Words spoken in haste are taken as deliberate wounds. Actions shaped by stress are perceived as personal betrayal. When both sides cling to ego, the conflict deepens. But when even one person treats the boat as empty, space opens. Instead of, "You hurt me on purpose," the recognition becomes, "You acted from your own pain." This shift allows compassion, reducing hidden resentment and allowing reconciliation. The empty boat also teaches humility. It reveals that much of what others do has little to do with us. We are not the center of the universe, and most boats drifting into ours are driven by currents we cannot see. This recognition dissolves pride as well as anger. When praised, we remember that conditions contributed teachers, opportunities, timing. When criticized, we remember that conditions shaped both our actions and the critic's perception. This humility heals the hidden pain of ego, which constantly oscillates between inflation and deflation. Practicing the empty boat in daily life requires vigilance. The ego reacts quickly, eager to defend. The key is to pause before responding, to ask, "Is this really about me?" Often, the answer is no. Even when the answer is partly yes, recognizing the conditions behind the action softens the sting. A harsh word may come from someone's exhaustion. An unfair decision may come from their fear. Seeing conditions instead of enemies preserves clarity without hatred. Over time, this practice becomes natural. Frustrations that once provoked days of bitterness now pass in moments. The heart feels lighter, the mind less reactive. Hidden pain loses its fuel because the ego no longer insists on constant defense. This does not mean we stop caring. It means we stop clinging. We respond wisely to life while resting in the spaciousness of non-self. The Dharma of the empty boat reveals a profound truth. Suffering often arises not from what happens, but from how the ego interprets it. By loosening that interpretation, by treating events as the product of conditions rather than personal attacks, we dissolve hidden anger. This is not escape, but liberation. It allows us to meet life with clarity, compassion, and resilience. The boat may still bump into ours, but if it is empty, there is no one left to fight. And in that emptiness, peace arises naturally, untouchable by the ego's demands. The empty boat shows us how much unnecessary pain comes from ego reactions, how anger fades when we stop making everything personal. Yet even when anger loosens its grip, there remains another force that quietly shapes our lives more than almost any other fear. Fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of death. Unlike anger, which often burns hot and visible, fear hides in subtle ways. It disguises itself as caution, hesitation, or control. It convinces us to shrink, to cling, to run. Hidden pain thrives under its shadow. The Buddha offered a rare teaching for this: abhaya, the state of non-fear. This is not bravado or denial, but a courage so deep it embraces vulnerability as the very doorway to peace. Fear often begins with attachment. We fear losing what we cling to: possessions, relationships, identity, status. The tighter the grip, the greater the fear. Hidden pain grows because fear never allows the heart to rest. Even in moments of joy, fear whispers, "This will not last." To cultivate non-fear is to loosen attachment, to live with openness rather than constant defense. When we no longer hold life so tightly, fear has less to protect and peace begins to emerge. Another root of fear is uncertainty. The mind longs for control, for guarantees that life can never provide. We fear the unknown because it cannot be predicted or mastered. Yet the truth is that uncertainty is the nature of life. Non-fear arises not by eliminating uncertainty, but by welcoming it. This is the courage to walk into the unknown with trust, to see unpredictability not as threat but as possibility. Hidden pain dissolves when we stop fighting the truth that nothing is fixed. Non-fear also means meeting vulnerability directly. Most people equate courage with invincibility, but the Dharma teaches otherwise. True courage comes from allowing ourselves to be tender, from not hiding behind walls of pride or avoidance. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is honesty. When we admit fear, grief, or longing, we open the door to connection and healing. Hidden pain often festers in silence, concealed by masks of strength. Non-fear heals by making space for authenticity, by daring to be seen fully. The practice of non-fear is not recklessness. It does not mean running blindly into danger or ignoring prudence. It means responding to life without being ruled by fear. For example, fear may tell us to avoid love because love risks heartbreak. Non-fear allows us to love fully, knowing heartbreak is possible, but also knowing that a life without love is itself a form of death. This balance transforms fear from a master into a guide. It informs without controlling, warns without imprisoning. In meditation, Fear often surfaces when the mind begins to quiet. The silence can feel threatening, as though the self is dissolving. Many turn away here, frightened of emptiness. But non-fear invites us to stay, to rest in the space beyond self. What feels like death to the ego is in fact liberation for the heart. Each time we remain with fear instead of fleeing, its power lessens. Over time, the unknown becomes less a void and more a field of openness. Non-fear also transforms how we meet death. Much hidden suffering comes from denial of mortality. We pretend death is far away or refuse to think of it at all. Yet this denial only fuels anxiety, casting a shadow over life. The Buddha taught that mindfulness of death is not morbid but freeing. To remember that life is fragile is to live more fully, more gratefully, without postponing joy. Non-fear of death dissolves hidden pain by aligning us with truth. Every moment is precious because it is impermanent. Fear also feeds social suffering. We fear rejection, judgment, exclusion. This fear shapes behavior, leading us to conform, to silence ourselves, to hide our authentic nature. Hidden pain multiplies when we live lives designed only to avoid disapproval. Non-fear here means daring to be authentic, daring to speak truth, daring to stand with integrity. This is not arrogance, but the courage to live honestly, even at the cost of misunderstanding. Peace comes not from pleasing everyone, but from living in alignment with one's deepest values. The practice of non-fear can be cultivated step by step. Begin by noticing fear in the body, tightness in the chest, shallow breath, restless thought. Naming it gently, fear is here, already loosens its grip. Then, instead of resisting, invite compassion. May I be safe, may I be at ease. Over time, this gentle attention transforms fear from an enemy into a teacher. Each encounter with fear becomes an opportunity to grow in courage. Community also plays a role. Just as Kalyana Mittata dissolves loneliness, companionship dissolves fear. To face challenges together reduces their weight. Fear thrives in isolation, but weakens when shared. Speaking fear aloud to a trusted friend or teacher often reveals it to be smaller than it felt in silence. The practice of non-fear is not solitary. It is strengthened when others remind us of our courage. Non-fear has profound implications for society as well. Many forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice arise from collective fear. Fear of difference, fear of loss of power, fear of scarcity. When communities cultivate non-fear, compassion expands. Instead of reacting with hostility, people respond with understanding. Hidden social wounds begin to heal when fear no longer drives division. The Buddha himself embodied non-fear. When confronted by threats, slander, or even attempts on his life, he remained calm, grounded in compassion. His courage was not in overpowering enemies, but in refusing to be ruled by fear. His example teaches us that non-fear is possible not only for saints, but for ordinary beings who cultivate mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. Ultimately, non-fear is liberation. Fear contracts the heart, closing possibilities, chaining us to imagined dangers. Non-fear expands the heart, opening it to life in its fullness. Vulnerability becomes strength, uncertainty becomes possibility, impermanence becomes beauty. Hidden pain, fed by constant defense against imagined threats, dissolves when we live with courage. The rare teaching of Abhaya reminds us that peace is not the absence of danger, but the presence of fearlessness. Not the shallow fearlessness of denial, but the deep courage of a heart that accepts life as it is fragile, uncertain, impermanent, and loves it anyway. This courage is the doorway to inner peace, a peace that cannot be shaken by fear because it no longer resists it. It welcomes even vulnerability as the ground of freedom. The rare teaching of non-fear shows that peace comes when we no longer live under the shadow of imagined threats. when vulnerability itself becomes a doorway to freedom. Yet even with courage in the heart, the world remains filled with countless hidden wounds, silent griefs, unspoken struggles, invisible battles carried by those around us. Many of these pains cannot be solved with grand solutions or sweeping change. What reaches them most deeply is something far smaller, quieter, and often overlooked: kindness in its simplest forms. The Dharma reminds us that small kindness, expressed through ordinary gestures, carries extraordinary healing power. Hidden pain often thrives in silence because people feel unseen. They carry burdens no one acknowledges, and that invisibility deepens the wound. A single act of kindness, a gentle word, a patient ear, a gesture of care breaks this invisibility. It tells the suffering heart, "You are not alone." The healing does not erase the pain, but it softens its sharpness. In that softening, space opens for resilience. Kindness in its truest form does not wait for perfect conditions. It does not ask whether the recipient deserves it or whether the act will be noticed. It arises naturally from a heart attuned to compassion. A smile offered to a stranger, a pause to hold the door, a few moments of listening without interruption, these appear small. But for someone drowning quietly, they may be the lifeline that keeps them afloat. Hidden suffering is often too heavy for logic, but it responds to warmth. The Buddha emphasized generosity not only in giving material things, but also in offering presence, patience, and goodwill. These subtle offerings cost little yet carry immense value. A person struggling with despair may not need advice, but simply the kindness of someone who listens without judgment. A worker overwhelmed by pressure may not need solutions, but the kindness of being acknowledged as human rather than as function. These are not heroic deeds, but they are profound medicine because they reach the very place where hidden pain grows in the feeling of disconnection. The Dharma of small kindness also heals because it interrupts cycles of suffering. Anger often leads to more anger, but a kind response can dissolve hostility. Fear breeds isolation, but kindness creates connection. Resentment festers in silence, but kindness opens dialogue. In this way, even tiny acts ripple outward, shifting conditions that would otherwise perpetuate suffering. What seems insignificant to the giver may reshape the entire emotional landscape of the receiver. For the one who practices, kindness transforms the heart as well. Small acts cultivate mindfulness, reminding us to notice others instead of being lost in our own concerns. They train the heart in generosity, loosening attachment to self. Over time, the practice of kindness builds resilience against bitterness and despair. Hidden pain does not vanish entirely, but kindness prevents it from turning into hardness. It keeps the heart soft, which is the ground of healing. This teaching also reveals that kindness is not about perfection. Many hesitate to act because they feel they cannot do enough. Yet the Dharma reminds us that enough is found in the simple gesture, offered sincerely. A glass of water to the thirsty, a word of comfort to the grieving, a hand extended to the weary, these are sufficient. The accumulation of such moments creates a culture of care, a web of compassion strong enough to hold even great suffering. Kindness is most powerful when it is directed not only toward those we love, but also toward those we overlook. The quiet neighbor, the unseen worker, the stranger passing by all carry burdens invisible to us. A kind glance or gentle word may reach a depth we cannot imagine. By widening the circle of kindness beyond preference, we dissolve the hidden pain of exclusion and affirm the dignity of every being. The practice of small kindness also extends inward. Many suffer because they deny themselves gentleness, demanding perfection or criticizing relentlessly. To offer kindness to oneself, a pause to rest, a forgiving thought after a mistake, a patient breath during difficulty, is not indulgence but necessary medicine. Self-kindness heals hidden wounds of shame and unworthiness, allowing the heart to extend genuine kindness to others without depletion. In relationships, small kindness accumulates into trust. Daily gestures, listening without distraction, offering gratitude, remembering to smile become the threads that weave strong bonds. Hidden pain often arises when people feel taken for granted, unseen in the flow of routine. Kindness repairs this by affirming presence, by saying through action, "You matter." Over time, these gestures build resilience strong enough to endure life's storms. The Dharma also teaches that kindness does not always require agreement. Even in conflict, one can act kindly, choosing respectful words, choosing patience instead of escalation. This does not erase differences but prevents them from hardening into hatred. Hidden pain in communities often grows from small cruelties repeated daily. The antidote is equally small kindnesses, repeated until they become the norm. Mindfulness strengthens this practice by revealing opportunities for kindness in moments we might otherwise miss. The act need not be dramatic. Offering a seat, sharing food, acknowledging effort, sending a message of care, each act creates ripples. The hidden suffering of others may remain unknown to us, but the kindness itself still carries healing power, precisely because it requires no knowledge of the details. Compassion flows without condition. Small kindness is radical because it works quietly in a world that glorifies grandeur. It does not make headlines, but it transforms lives. It teaches that healing is not only found in great insights or dramatic breakthroughs, but in the steady warmth of daily care. For those carrying hidden wounds, the difference between despair and hope may be a single act of kindness encountered at the right moment. Ultimately, the Dharma of small kindness reveals that compassion is not measured by size but by sincerity. A gesture may be subtle, but if it arises from genuine care, it becomes vast. It touches the part of the heart that longs to be seen, to be held, to belong. Hidden pain dissolves not because the world changes instantly, but because connection is restored. Even the smallest spark of kindness can light the way through immense darkness. The practice of small kindness shows that healing often comes not through grand gestures but through quiet care, offered moment by moment. Yet kindness, as powerful as it is, sometimes needs to be paired with another quality: courage. There are wounds so deep, fears so ingrained, and shadows so persistent that kindness alone does not bring them fully to light. For these hidden pains, the Dharma offers another teaching, one as fierce as it is compassionate: the lion's roar. It is the courage to face suffering directly, without flinching, to meet even the darkest places of the heart with unshakable fearlessness. The lion's roar is the Buddha's declaration of truth spoken with clarity, strength, and confidence. It is not arrogance or aggression, but the fearless proclamation of Dharma in the face of ignorance. Applied inwardly, this teaching becomes the courage to stop running from hidden wounds. Where the mind prefers avoidance, the lion's roar insists on honesty. Where fear convinces us to hide, the roar declares, "This too can be faced." Hidden pain loses its grip when met with such fearless clarity. Avoidance is one of the most common strategies for dealing with suffering. We distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or endless busyness. We bury grief beneath obligations. We cover trauma with silence. Yet what is avoided does not vanish, it festers. The lion's roar is the moment we turn toward the pain rather than away. It is the willingness to look directly, even when it shakes us. This courage does not come from force, but from trust in the Dharma. Whatever arises, it can be known, and what is known can be transformed. Facing hidden wounds requires honesty with oneself. This is difficult because the ego prefers comforting stories. We tell ourselves we are fine when we are not. We blame others to avoid our own role. We cling to pride rather than admit fear. The lion's roar cuts through these illusions. It demands that we tell the truth to ourselves, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Healing cannot begin until the wound is seen clearly. The roar is the act of seeing without denial. This courage also requires patience. To roar like a lion is not to conquer everything in one instant, but to refuse retreat. A lion does not cower when challenged. It holds its ground. Similarly, facing inner wounds is not about erasing them instantly, but about staying present with them. Fear may arise, shame may surface, grief may swell, but the lion's roar is the refusal to turn away. Each time we remain present, the wound loses some of its hidden power. Meditation provides the ground for this practice. In stillness, buried emotions often rise. Old memories surface, long-suppressed pain stirs. Many abandon practice at this stage, believing they are failing. But this is where the lion's roar is needed most. To sit with fear, to breathe with grief, to allow anger to unfold without acting on it. This is the roar in action. It is the statement, "I will not flee my own heart." Over time, this courage reveals that the emotions themselves are impermanent. What once felt unbearable becomes bearable, then transforms. The lion's roar also applies to how we speak truth in relationships. Hidden pain often lingers because it is never voiced. We fear rejection, conflict, or misunderstanding, so we stay silent. Yet silence can wound more deeply than conflict. To roar here means to speak with clarity and honesty, not to harm, but to reveal. It is the courage to say, "This hurt me," or "This is what I need," or "This is my truth." Such speech is not easy, but it is healing. It transforms hidden pain into shared reality, opening the possibility of resolution. Another dimension of this teaching is the courage to face collective suffering. Just as individuals hide pain, societies hide injustices. Denial, avoidance, and silence perpetuate harm. The lion's roar in this context is the courage to confront injustice directly, to speak for compassion even when it is unpopular, to stand firm in truth even when the crowd resists. This is not separate from personal healing, for hidden wounds are often tied to the larger systems we live in. To face them fully requires courage both within and without. The roar is also a reminder of dignity. Hidden pain often convinces us that we are weak, broken, or unworthy. But to roar like a lion is to remember our inherent strength. The Buddha's fearlessness was not superhuman, it was the natural strength of a mind that no longer ran from itself. Each person carries this potential. The roar within us is the refusal to let suffering define us, the insistence that freedom is possible even in the face of darkness. Practicing the lion's roar requires balance. It is not about aggression or forcing oneself to endure beyond capacity. Too much intensity can re-traumatize rather than heal. The roar must be paired with compassion. Just as a lion protects its cubs fiercely, we must protect our own hearts as we face suffering. Courage does not mean recklessness, it means presence combined with care. When balanced, the roar becomes healing rather than harsh. Over time, this practice changes our relationship to fear itself. Instead of seeing fear as a wall, we see it as a doorway. Each time we step through, the world expands. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once seemed overwhelming becomes part of the path. The lion's roar teaches that peace is not found by avoiding fear, but by meeting it until it loses its power. Hidden pain dissolves